My son-in-law snatched my passport from my hand, right in the middle of the busy terminal at O'Hare Airport, and stared me down with eyes full of arrogance. "You are not going to Texas," he spat out, his voice loud enough for the people in the business class line to turn and look. "You are staying home to take care of the dogs, because Jasmine forgot to book the kennel." Then he did the unthinkable. He took my boarding pass, the one I had paid $4,000 for, and tore it in half right in front of my face. The sound of that paper ripping was louder to me than the jet engines outside. He threw the pieces at my chest and walked away with my daughter, leaving me standing there like a discarded piece of luggage. I did not chase them. I did not scream. I stayed silent. I simply walked to the counter and canceled the flights I had paid for with my additional card. When they checked in 5 minutes later, the screen flashed red. Denied. Before I continue this story of how I turned their vacation into a nightmare, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. My name is Albert Robinson. I am 68 years old, and I spent 40 years of my life on the assembly line at the Ford plant in Detroit before retiring to Chicago. I learned 2 things working the line: precision and patience. If a bolt was loose, you didn't force it, you fixed it, or you replaced the part. I applied that same philosophy to my life, raising my daughter Jasmine with the best education money could buy, and saving every penny so I could live with dignity. But it seems that somewhere along the line, I built a defective part in my own family. I arrived at O'Hare Airport 3 hours early that morning. That is the old foreman in me. You are never late. If you are on time, you are late. If you are early, you are on time. I was wearing my best Sunday suit, a charcoal gray 3-piece I had bought for my retirement party, and my favorite Stetson hat. I sat near the window in Terminal 3, watching the ground crew load luggage into the belly of a Boeing 777. I felt a rare buzz of excitement in my chest. This wasn't just a trip. This was the Robinson family reunion in Houston. My brothers were flying in from Atlanta. My cousins were driving up from New Orleans. It had been 5 years since we were all together. To make this trip special, I had decided to treat everyone. And when I say treat, I mean I opened the vault. I paid for first-class tickets for myself, for my daughter Jasmine, and for her husband, Hunter. I rented a seaside villa on the Gulf Coast for the week. I even booked a private chef for the Saturday night dinner. The total came to nearly $20,000. It was a lot of money, but I looked at it as an investment in memories. My wife, Sarah, God rest her soul, always said that money is just paper until you use it to make someone smile. I wanted to see my daughter smile. I wanted to see her relaxed, away from the stress she always claimed to be under. I checked my watch. 7:30 in the morning. Our flight was at 9. They were late. I wasn't surprised. Hunter was always late. Hunter was a 35-year-old real estate agent who spent more time talking about deals than closing them. He was a tall, white man with a smile that looked like it was practiced in a mirror and a handshake that always felt slippery. He drove a leased BMW, wore knockoff designer watches, and treated me with a patronizing tone that made my blood boil. He called me Pops or Old-Timer, never Albert or Mr. Robinson. Finally, I saw them coming through the sliding glass doors. They were walking fast, looking flustered. Hunter was dragging 2 massive suitcases, sweating through his tight-fitted t-shirt. Jasmine was trailing behind him, looking at her phone, her thumb scrolling furiously across the screen. She didn't look like a woman about to go on a luxury vacation. She looked like she was marching to a funeral. I stood up, smoothing the front of my jacket, and waved. "Over here," I called out. Hunter didn't wave back. He just steered the luggage cart toward me, his face red and irritated. When they got close, I could smell the stale scent of cigarettes on him, mixed with too much expensive cologne. "About time you guys showed up," I said, trying to keep the mood light. "The line for check-in is getting long. I already printed my pass, but you two need to tag your bags." Hunter stopped the cart a few inches from my polished shoes. He didn't say hello. He didn't ask how I was. He just wiped his forehead with the back of his hand and looked at Jasmine. "Tell him," Hunter said. I looked at my daughter, Jasmine, my little girl. The girl who used to sit on my lap while I read the Sunday paper. She was 32 now, but in that moment, she looked like a scared teenager. She refused to make eye contact with me. She stared at the polished terrazzo floor of the terminal. "Dad," she started, her voice barely a whisper. "We have a problem." I frowned, clutching my boarding pass a little tighter. "What kind of problem?" Did you forget your ID? We can still fix that if we hurry." "No, Albert," Hunter interrupted, stepping between me and my daughter. His voice was loud, booming with that false authority he always tried to project. "It is not an ID problem. It is a dog problem." I blinked. "A dog problem?" "Yeah," Hunter continued, crossing his arms over his chest. "Jasmine forgot to book the luxury kennel for the Dobermans. We called them on the way here, and they are fully booked. Every kennel in Chicago is booked. It is peak season." I looked at them confused. "Okay, that is unfortunate, but we are here now. Can't you ask a neighbor? Can't you call one of Hunter's friends?" Hunter let out a short, derisive laugh. "My friends are busy making money, Albert. They don't have time to babysit dogs. And we are not leaving Zeus and Apollo with some random neighbor. Those are purebred dogs. They are worth more than your car." I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. I looked at the departure board. Our flight was blinking on time. "So what are you saying?" I asked, though I think I already knew the answer. "Someone has to stay," Hunter said, as if he was explaining simple math to a child. "And obviously it can't be us. I have networking to do in Texas. Jasmine needs this break. She has been working herself to the bone." He took a step closer to me. The smell of his cologne was overpowering. "You, on the other hand," he said, poking a finger toward my chest. "You are retired. You have nothing to do. You just sit around all day anyway. It doesn't matter if you go to Texas or stay in your living room. It is all the same for you." I looked at Jasmine, pleading silently for her to speak up, to say something, to defend me. "I paid for this trip, Jasmine. I organized the reunion. My brothers are waiting for me." "Dad," Jasmine finally said, looking up. Her eyes were wet, but they were hard. "Please, Hunter is really stressed. The dogs need someone they know. Just do this for us, okay? We will FaceTime you from the dinner on Saturday. It will be like you were there." "Like I am there?" I repeated, my voice trembling slightly. "I paid $20,000 to be there, Jasmine, not to be on a phone screen." That is when Hunter lost his patience. He let out a groan of frustration. "God, you are so selfish," he snapped. He reached out and, before I could react, snatched my passport and boarding pass from my hand. "Hey!" I shouted, reaching for it. "Give that back!" "No," Hunter said. He held them high above his head, knowing I couldn't reach them with my bad shoulder. "You are not listening. You are not going. You are going to take an Uber back to our house. You are going to feed the dogs, and you are going to make sure they get their exercise." Then, with a casual cruelty that froze the blood in my veins, he took the boarding pass. My ticket to see my family, my ticket to joy, and he ripped it. The sound was sharp and final. Rip! He didn't just tear it once, he put the pieces together and tore them again. Then he tossed the confetti of paper at me. It fluttered down, landing on my shoulders and on the floor. He shoved my passport back into my chest hard enough to make me stumble back a step. "There," Hunter said, dusting off his hands. "Decision made. Now go home, old man. Be useful for once." I stood there, frozen. The noise of the airport seemed to fade away, leaving only a high-pitched ringing in my ears. I looked down at the torn pieces of paper on the floor. I looked at the people around us. A woman in a business suit was staring with her mouth open. A security guard was watching from a distance, but hadn't moved. I looked at Jasmine. This was the moment she should have screamed at him, the moment she should have slapped him, the moment she should have chosen her father, the man who worked double shifts to buy her braces, the man who paid for her college, the man who held her hand when her mother died. But she didn't. She looked at me, then she looked at Hunter, and she adjusted her purse strap. "I am sorry, Dad," she mumbled. "The keys are under the mat. Make sure Apollo gets his medicine." And then she turned around. She took the handle of her suitcase and followed her husband toward the priority access line. I watched them go. I watched Hunter put his arm around her waist, leaning in to whisper something that made him chuckle. He walked with a bounce in his step, the walk of a man who had just won, a man who had exerted his dominance and cleared the obstacle. He thought he had won. He thought I was just a helpless old man who would pick up his torn ticket, wipe his eyes, and obediently go feed his dogs. He forgot who I was. He forgot that you don't survive 40 years in a Detroit auto plant by being soft. He forgot that I was the one who inspected the brakes before the car left the factory. And if the brakes were bad, I didn't just let the car go. I stopped the whole damn line. I took a deep breath. I adjusted my Stetson hat. I brushed the pieces of the ticket off my suit jacket. I didn't pick them up. I left them right there on the floor. I turned around and walked toward the first-class customer service desk. There was no line. The agent, a young woman with a kind face named Sarah, looked up and smiled. "Good morning, sir," she said. "How can I help you today?" I reached into my inner pocket and pulled out my wallet. I didn't pull out the debit card I gave Jasmine for groceries. I pulled out the Centurion card, the heavy black titanium card that I had earned through decades of wise investments and frugal living. A card Hunter didn't even know I had. "Good morning, Sarah," I said, my voice steady and calm, though a fire was raging in my gut. "I need to make a change to a reservation." "Certainly," she typed on her keyboard. "What is the confirmation number?" I gave it to her. She hummed as she pulled up the details. "Ah, I see it here," she said. "Mr. Robinson, Mrs. Robinson Vance, and Mr. Vance. 3 first-class round trips to Houston. And a hotel package. What would you like to change?" I looked over my shoulder. I could see Hunter and Jasmine standing in the security line. Hunter was laughing, checking his watch, probably thinking about the expensive bourbon he was going to drink on the plane. My bourbon. "I want to cancel the tickets for Hunter Vance and Jasmine Robinson Vance," I said. Sarah paused. "Just cancel them? For a future credit?" "No," I said. "I want to cancel them completely. Refund the money to my card, and cancel the return flights too. Oh, and the villa rental? Cancel that as well." She looked at me, concerned. "Sir, if I do that, the system will instantly invalidate their check-in. If they are at security, they won't get through," I finished her sentence. "Yes, sir," she said slowly. "That is correct." "Are you sure?" I thought about the bike Jasmine rode when she was 6. It was pink with white streamers. I remembered running behind her, holding the seat, terrified she would fall. I remembered the day she graduated college, how proud I was. And then I remembered the sound of the paper tearing. Rip! The look in Hunter's eyes, the silence of my daughter. "I am sure," I said. "Do it." Sarah typed for a few seconds. The sound of her keystrokes was like a gavel coming down in a courtroom. "It is done," she said. "The refund has been processed. The tickets are voided." "Thank you, Sarah." I turned away from the counter and walked over to the large glass window overlooking the tarmac. I didn't leave the airport. I wasn't going to go home to feed those dogs. Not yet. I wanted to see this. I walked up to the second level, to a coffee shop that overlooked the security checkpoint. I ordered a black coffee, sat down, and waited. 5 minutes later, I saw them. They were at the front of the line. Hunter handed his phone to the TSA agent to scan his digital boarding pass. He was smiling, saying something to the agent, probably bragging about flying first class. The agent scanned the phone. A loud, harsh beep echoed through the area. A red light flashed on the podium. I took a sip of my coffee. It was hot, bitter, and absolutely delicious. Hunter frowned. He tapped his phone screen and held it out again. The agent scanned it again. Beep! Red light. I saw the confusion on Hunter's face turn to annoyance. He started gesturing. He pointed at Jasmine. She stepped up and offered her phone. The agent scanned hers. Beep! Red light. People behind them started to grumble. The line was backed up. A supervisor walked over. I watched as the supervisor looked at the screen, shook his head, and said something to Hunter. I couldn't hear the words, but I could read the body language perfectly. "Sir, you have no valid ticket." Hunter's face went from red to purple. He started shouting. He pointed back toward the check-in counters. He waved his arms. Security guards began to converge on them. 2 large officers stepped in front of Hunter, hands resting on their belts. My phone started to buzz in my pocket. I looked at the screen. A picture of Jasmine popped up. Then it stopped. Then it started again. Then a text message. "Dad, what is going on? The tickets aren't working." I ignored it. I watched as the officers escorted them out of the line, guiding them back toward the public area. Hunter was still shouting, looking furious and humiliated. Jasmine was crying now, hiding her face in her hands. I took another sip of coffee. I had raised a daughter, but I had enabled a monster. And today, for the first time in a long time, the foreman was back on the shift, and I was shutting down the whole assembly line. I turned my back on my daughter and her husband, and began the long walk toward the first-class service desk. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but my steps were measured and steady. That is the discipline of the assembly line. You do not panic when the machinery grinds to a halt. You assess, you diagnose, you fix. Hunter had looked at me and seen a senile old man who was good for nothing but walking dogs. He saw my gray hair and my limp and assumed I was powerless. He did not understand that power does not come from youth or from loud voices. Power comes from leverage, and for the last 40 years, while he was likely cheating on math tests, I was building leverage. I walked past the chaotic economy check-in lines, where families were arguing over baggage weight limits. I walked past the crying babies and the stressed businessmen. I adjusted my hat and approached the quiet sanctuary of the first-class area. The carpet here was thicker. The air smelled of lavender and money. A young man in a suit tried to step in front of me, assuming I was in the wrong place. He glanced at my skin color, and then at the sign that said, "Priority access only." I did not say a word. I simply kept walking with a look that said I belonged there more than he ever would. When I reached the counter, the agent named Sarah looked up. She saw a man in a well-tailored suit. She saw the dignity in my posture. But what truly caught her attention was the heavy black titanium card I placed on the marble countertop. The Centurion card from American Express, the black card. You do not get this card by asking for it. You are invited. It signifies that you pay your debts. It signifies that you have resources. Hunter had probably never seen one in real life. He likely thought they were urban legends from rap videos. But this was real, and it was about to become his judge, jury, and executioner. Sarah picked up the card with both hands, treating it with the reverence one might show a religious artifact. She typed my name into her terminal, and her posture straightened even further. "Good morning, Mr. Robinson. It is an honor to serve you. How can I assist you today?" Her voice was smooth and professional, a stark contrast to the disrespect I had just endured 5 minutes ago. I looked her in the eye. "I need to make immediate cancellations to my itinerary. All of it." Sarah nodded and began typing. I watched her screen reflect in her glasses. I thought about the money I was about to incinerate. For a man who used to save aluminum cans to buy school supplies for his daughter, what I was about to do was madness. But dignity has no price tag. "Let us go through the itemized list, Mr. Robinson," Sarah said. "I have 3 round-trip first-class tickets to Houston on Flight 492. The total cost for these tickets was $4,200. If you cancel now, since we are less than 2 hours before departure, there is a penalty fee of $500 per ticket." I waved my hand dismissively. "I do not care about the penalty. Cancel them, all 3. But specifically, I want to ensure the tickets issued to Hunter Vance and Jasmine Robinson Vance are voided immediately. I want them removed from the manifest." Sarah typed a command. "Done. The tickets are voided. The refund of $2,700 will be credited to your account within 7 days." I nodded. "Keep going." She scrolled down. "I see a reservation for the presidential villa at the Galveston Gulf Resort. 7 nights, all-inclusive package. The cost is $12,500. This is a non-refundable booking, sir. If you cancel, you will lose the entire deposit, $12,000. That was more than I made in my first year at the auto plant. I remembered the brochure for that villa. It had a private pool. It had a view of the sunset that I knew Jasmine would have loved. I had pictured us sitting there, drinking iced tea, laughing about old times. I had pictured Hunter finally relaxing and treating me with a shred of decency. But those were just pictures. The reality was a torn ticket on a dirty airport floor. The reality was my daughter turning her back on me. "Burn it," I said, my voice flat. "Cancel the villa. I do not care about the refund. I want the reservation deleted from their system. If they show up at that front desk, I want them to be told that no such booking exists. I want them to be turned away at the gate." Sarah looked at me with wide eyes. She hesitated for a moment, perhaps wondering if I was having a mental breakdown. "Sir, that is $12,000. Are you absolutely certain?" I leaned in close. "My son-in-law just told me to go home and feed his dogs. He thinks I am a servant. I am paying $12,000 to teach him that I am the master of my own house. Cancel it." She swallowed hard and hit the enter key. The sound was sharp, final. "The reservation is canceled." "What else?" I asked. "There is a private limousine service booked to pick up your party at Houston Hobby Airport. A stretch Hummer. That is $2,100 prepaid. Cancel it, I said. Let them take a taxi, if they ever get there. And the private chef for Saturday night, $800. Cancel it. Let them eat sandwiches. Sarah worked for another 2 minutes, her fingers flying across the keyboard. With every keystroke, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. It was expensive freedom, but it was freedom nonetheless. I was reclaiming my worth. I was taking back every single dollar I had spent trying to buy their love. I realized then that you cannot buy respect. You have to command it. And sometimes, to command respect, you have to be willing to destroy everything you built for them. All done, Mr. Robinson, Sarah said, handing me back my black card. Everything has been wiped clean. The total value of services canceled is $19,600. Is there anything else I can do for you? Yes, I said. One more thing. Can you tell me where the best coffee shop is that has a view of the security checkpoint? She smiled, a small, knowing smile. Take the escalator to the mezzanine level. There is a cafe called the Sky View. It looks directly down on the TSA screening area. Thank you, Sarah. You have been more help than you know. I took my card and walked toward the escalator. I did not feel regret. I felt a cold, hard resolve. I went up to the mezzanine level. It was quieter up there. I ordered a large black coffee. No sugar, no cream. I wanted it bitter. I wanted to taste the reality of the morning. I found a table right next to the glass railing. From here, I had a perfect view of the security lines below. It was like looking at an ant farm. Hundreds of people shuffling through the maze of belts and barriers. I scanned the crowd. It took me a moment, but then I spotted them. Hunter was easy to find. He was wearing a bright yellow polo shirt that was too tight for him, standing with his chest puffed out. Jasmine was next to him, looking at her phone. They were nearing the front of the priority access line. I checked my watch. The cancellation had been processed 3 minutes ago. The system update should be immediate. This was the digital age. Consequences travel at the speed of light. I took a slow sip of my coffee. The heat spread through my chest. I watched Hunter step up to the podium. He didn't even look at the TSA agent. He just thrust his phone out with that arrogant tilt of his head he always used. The agent held the scanner over the screen. From my perch on the second floor, I couldn't hear the beep, but I saw the light. A bright, flashing red light on the scanner console. Hunter frowned. He pulled his phone back, wiped the screen on his shirt, and shoved it forward again. Red light. I saw his body language change. The arrogance evaporated, replaced by confusion. He turned to Jasmine. She stepped up and offered her phone. Red light. The line behind them stopped. People began to shift their weight, impatient. A businessman in a blue suit checked his watch and said something to Hunter. Hunter spun around and snapped back at him. I could see his face turning that shade of crimson that meant he was losing control. Then, the TSA supervisor stepped in. He was a large man with crossed arms. He pointed at the screen. He shook his head. Hunter started waving his hands. He pointed back toward the check-in counters. He pointed at his phone. He was making a scene. I saw the supervisor speak into his radio. A moment later, 2 airport police officers materialized from the sides. They didn't approach aggressively, but they approached with purpose. They stepped on either side of Hunter and Jasmine. Hunter looked like he had been slapped. He backed away, hands raised in a gesture of innocence. Jasmine looked terrified. She was looking around wildly, scanning the terminal. For a second, her eyes seemed to drift up toward the mezzanine, toward where I was sitting. I didn't wave. I didn't look away. I just took another sip of my coffee. They were being pulled out of the line. The other passengers surged forward, relieved to be rid of the bottleneck. Hunter and Jasmine were escorted to the side, surrounded by uniforms. Their vacation was over before it had even begun. They were stranded in Chicago with no tickets, no reservation, and no idea that the old man they had insulted was watching it all from above, drinking the best cup of coffee of his entire life. The phone in my pocket began to vibrate against my leg. It was a long, sustained vibration, a call. I didn't need to look to know who it was. I let it ring. Let them panic. Let them sweat. Today, I wasn't the father. I wasn't the provider. I was the lesson. I stepped out of the terminal and into the cool Chicago air. It tasted different now. It tasted like ozone and victory. I hailed a yellow taxi, the old-fashioned kind. Because I have never trusted those apps that track your every move. I slid into the back seat and gave the driver my address. As the car pulled away from the curb, leaving the chaos of O'Hare behind, my pocket began to burn. It started as a single vibration, then another. Then it became a continuous, angry buzzing against my thigh. It felt like a trapped hornet trying to sting its way out. I did not look at it immediately. I let it buzz. I watched the gray highway slip past the window. I watched the skyline of the city where I had worked for 40 years rise in the distance. Finally, the buzzing stopped for a split second, only to restart with renewed intensity. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the smartphone Jasmine had convinced me to buy last Christmas, so I could see pictures of the grandchildren she promised to give me but never did. The screen was lit up like a Christmas tree. 52 missed calls, 37 text messages. The notifications were scrolling down the screen so fast I could barely read them. I scrolled to the top. The first few messages were from Jasmine. They were confused. "Dad, where are you? Dad, the agent says the tickets are invalid. Dad, please pick up. Dad, is this a mistake?" Then, as the minutes passed and the reality of their situation set in, the tone changed. Confusion turned to panic. Hunter is yelling at the police. They are threatening to detain us. Dad, pick up the phone right now. And then, the panic turned to the ugly, raw anger that I knew was lurking beneath their polished surfaces. The most recent texts were from Hunter. "You senile old fool. What did you do? Answer me, or I swear to God I will have you committed. You are going to pay for this." I stared at the words. Senile old fool. That is what he called the man who paid for his wedding. That is what he called the man who paid off his student loans. I was reading a text that said, "You are dead to me," when the phone rang again in my hand. The screen flashed, "Hunter calling." I let it ring 3 times. 1, 2, 3. I took a deep breath, the same way I used to before lifting a heavy engine block. I slid my thumb across the screen and brought the phone to my ear. I did not say hello, I just listened. "What the hell is wrong with you?" Hunter screamed. His voice was so loud, I had to pull the phone away from my ear. The taxi driver glanced at me in the rearview mirror, but I just stared straight ahead. Hunter continued his assault. "Do you have any idea what you just did, Albert? Do you? We are standing here like criminals. The police are searching our bags. They said the tickets were reported as fraudulent." Fraudulent. I am a businessman, Albert. I cannot have this on my record. Fix it. Fix it right now. Get on the phone and tell them it was a mistake. Tell them your finger slipped. I don't care what you tell them, just get us on that plane. I waited until he paused to take a breath. His breathing was ragged, panic mixed with rage. "I cannot do that, Hunter," I said calmly. My voice was steady, contrasting sharply with his hysteria. "What do you mean you cannot?" Hunter shouted. "Of course you can. You paid for them. Call the airline. Use that black card of yours and buy new ones. Upgrade us to private if you have to. Just get us out of here." "No," I said. There was a silence on the other end, a stunned, heavy silence. "No," Hunter repeated, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean, I am not going to buy you new tickets. I am not going to fix this. You made it very clear what my role is in this family, Hunter. You told me at the check-in counter. You tore up my ticket and you gave me my orders." I could hear Jasmine crying in the background. She was sobbing, begging him to give her the phone, but he pushed her away. "That was a joke, Albert," Hunter stammered, trying to backtrack but failing miserably. "I was just stressed. We were late. I did not mean it." "You meant every word," I said. "You looked me in the eye and you told me that my purpose was to serve you. You told me I was not going to Texas. You told me to go home." "Well, Hunter, I am following your instructions. I am in a taxi right now. I am going home." "You are going home?" Hunter asked, disbelief coloring his tone. "You are leaving us here?" "Yes," I said. "You told me the dogs need to be fed. You said they are worth more than my car. You said I needed to be useful. So I am going to be useful. I am going to go home and take care of the dogs. I cannot talk to you right now, Hunter. I have a job to do. I have to make sure Apollo gets his medicine." "Stop it," Hunter screamed. "Stop playing games. We have no tickets. We have no hotel. You have no hotel," I corrected him. "I canceled that too. And the limo. And the chef, you did what? The scream that came out of his mouth was not human. It was the sound of an entitled child having his favorite toy smashed with a hammer. You canceled the villa. That was $12,000. Are you insane? You are burning money just to spite me. It is my money, I said, and I will burn it if I want to. It keeps me warm. Listen to me, you old piece of garbage, Hunter hissed. If you do not turn this taxi around and come back here with your credit card, I will make your life a living hell. You live in my world now, Albert. I manage your assets. I know where you sleep. And that is when I smiled. A cold, hard smile. He thought he managed my assets. He thought he knew me. You manage nothing, Hunter, I said. And speaking of assets, I assume you are going to try to buy your own tickets now. You are going to try to prove you don't need me. Go ahead. Use the card I gave you, the one you use for your business lunches and your designer suits. I could hear him fumbling with his wallet. I could hear the slap of plastic on the counter. I could hear him talking to the agent. Run it. Run it again. I waited. I knew exactly what was happening. It is declined, I heard the agent say in the background. Try it again, Hunter yelled. It is an Amex Platinum. It has no limit. It is declined, sir. The card has been reported lost or stolen by the primary account holder. I listened to the realization wash over him. The primary account holder, me. I had deactivated his supplementary card the moment I left the counter. You cut me off, Hunter breathed into the phone. You actually cut me off. I did, I said. You are stranded, Hunter. You have no ticket. You have no reservation. You have no credit card. And from what I recall, you spent your last cash on those fake watches you wear. You are stuck in Chicago. And guess what? Your luggage is already on the plane. It is going to Houston without you, so you do not even have a change of underwear. Albert, please. It was Jasmine this time. She had snatched the phone. Dad, please. We can't get home. We took an Uber here. We don't have money for a taxi back. It is 50 miles. I closed my eyes. Her voice used to be the only thing that could melt my heart. But today, it sounded like manipulation. You have legs, Jasmine, I said, and you have a husband. Let him provide for you. Let him figure it out. He is the big businessman, right? Let him network his way home. Dad, wait. Don't hang up. Dad. Goodbye, Jasmine. Take care of your husband. I have dogs to watch. I pulled the phone away from my ear. I didn't just press the red button to end the call. I held down the power button on the side. I watched the screen fade to black. The little Apple logo appeared and then vanished. The phone was dead. The lifeline was cut. I sat back against the leather seat of the taxi. The silence that filled the cab was heavy, but it wasn't empty. It was full of peace. For 10 years, since my wife died, I had been afraid of the silence. I had filled it with their noise, their demands, their drama. I had paid for their noise because I thought it was better than being alone. But I was wrong. The driver looked at me in the mirror. "Everything okay back there, sir?" he asked. I looked out the window at the familiar streets of my neighborhood passing by. The trees were bare, stripped by the winter wind, standing tall and resilient against the gray sky. "Everything is fine," I said. "Better than fine. I just took out the trash." I closed my eyes and let the rhythm of the road lull me. I was going home, but for the first time in a long time, I wasn't going home to be a guest in my own life. I was going home to reclaim my kingdom, and I knew, with the certainty of a man who has inspected every bolt and screw, that the real work was just beginning. Hunter and Jasmine would find a way back. Rats always find their way back to the ship. But when they arrived, they would find that the captain had locked the bridge, and the storm they were walking into was far worse than a canceled flight. The taxi dropped me off at the curb of my own home on Sycamore Street. It was a solid 2-story brick house that I had bought 30 years ago with the overtime pay from the assembly line. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, just looking at it. To anyone else passing by, it looked peaceful. The lawn was manicured, thanks to the landscaping service I paid for. The curtains were drawn. It looked like the sanctuary of a retired man who had earned his rest. But as I walked up the driveway, dragging my suitcase behind me, I felt a strange heaviness in my chest. This was the house where I had raised Jasmine. This was the house where my wife Sarah had taken her last breath in the master bedroom upstairs. It was supposed to be a place of love. Now, it felt like a crime scene waiting to be discovered. I walked up the front steps, my knees popping slightly in the cold air. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my key ring. It was a simple brass key, worn smooth by decades of use. I knew the feel of it in the lock. I knew the exact amount of pressure it took to turn the deadbolt. I slid the key toward the keyhole, but metal hit metal. I frowned and looked down. The brass lock I had installed myself in 1995 was gone. In its place was a sleek black digital keypad with a glowing blue touchscreen, a smart lock. I stood there, staring at the device. I tried to push my key in, but there was no keyhole, just a smooth surface demanding a code I did not have. Hunter. He had changed the locks. He had changed the locks on my house without even telling me. I felt a surge of indignation so hot it made my face flush. He had not just taken over my life. He had literally locked me out of my own property. I was standing on my own porch, a man who had paid off his mortgage 10 years early, and I was being treated like a solicitor. I tried the handle. Locked. I rang the doorbell, hoping maybe, just maybe, he had left a friend inside to watch the place. Silence. I walked around to the side of the house. My heart was pounding, not from exertion, but from humiliation. I tried the side door that led to the garage. Locked. I tried the garage keypad. I punched in the code I had used for 20 years. It beeped red. Code invalid. He had changed that too. I was trapped outside my own fortress. I walked to the backyard. The wooden fence I had built with my own hands stood 6 feet tall. The gate was padlocked from the inside. I looked around to make sure none of the neighbors were watching. Mrs. Higgins next door was a gossip, and I did not want her to see Albert Robinson breaking into his own home. I dragged a plastic recycling bin over to the fence. I am 68 years old. My joints are stiff. My shoulder still aches from years of lifting chassis parts. But anger is a powerful fuel. I stepped onto the bin. It buckled slightly under my weight. I grabbed the top of the fence, wood splinters digging into my palms. I heaved myself up. My suit jacket snagged on a nail. I heard a rip, but I did not care. I threw my leg over the top and dropped down into the backyard. I landed hard on the frozen grass, jarring my ankles. I stayed on my knees for a moment, catching my breath, feeling like a common thief. This was what my son-in-law had reduced me to, a burglar in my own kingdom. I limped toward the back patio door. Thankfully, Hunter was as lazy as he was arrogant. He had secured the front like Fort Knox to show off his gadgets, but he had forgotten to engage the deadbolt on the sliding glass door in the back. I pulled the handle. It slid open with a heavy rumble. I stepped inside. The first thing that hit me was not the sight. It was the smell. My house always smelled like lemon polish and old books. Sarah had been fanatic about cleanliness, and I had kept up her standards. But as I stepped into the kitchen, the air was thick, heavy, and sour. It smelled like a frat house after a weekend bender. It was the stench of stale beer, rotting grease, and something else. Something muskier. Something that smelled like wet fur and ammonia. I walked into the kitchen and stopped dead. My granite countertops, which I wiped down every single morning, were invisible. They were covered in a layer of filth. Pizza boxes were stacked 3 feet high, some of them open with half-eaten crusts, turning green with mold. Empty bottles of expensive liquor, my liquor, were scattered everywhere. Bourbon, scotch, vodka. There were sticky puddles on the floor where drinks had been spilled and never cleaned up. I walked into the living room. My leather recliner, the one I sat in to read the newspaper, had a cigarette burn right in the center of the headrest. I don't smoke. Hunter smoked. He had sat in my chair, in my house, and put a cigarette out on the leather I had worked hundreds of hours to afford. There were takeout bags from every fast food joint in the city littering the coffee table. A plate of spaghetti had been left on the side table, the sauce dried and caked like blood. The expensive Persian rug Jasmine had begged me to buy for the entryway was stained with dark, muddy footprints. I felt a wave of nausea. This was not just a mess. This was disrespect in its purest physical form. They lived here rent-free. I paid the utilities. I paid for the groceries. And this is how they treated my sanctuary. They waited until I went to bed, or until I went to the library, to turn my home into a garbage dump. They saw me as the janitor. They probably laughed about it. Let the old man clean it up. He likes cleaning. I walked to the dining room. The table was covered in mail, unopened envelopes. I picked one up. Final notice. It was a property tax bill. I frowned. I gave Jasmine the money for the property taxes 6 months ago. She said she had paid it online. I picked up another letter. Past due. Water bill. Another one. A lawsuit summons addressed to Hunter Vance for breach of contract. They were drowning, and they were using my home as their life raft while simultaneously punching holes in the floor. I was about to go upstairs to check my bedroom when I heard it. It was a low, whimpering sound, then a scratch, then a bark. It was coming from the basement. Hunter had told me to stay home and watch the dogs. He said Zeus and Apollo, his prize Dobermans, needed care. I assumed they were in the kitchen or the garage, but the sound was coming from beneath the floorboards. I walked to the basement door. The smell of ammonia got stronger with every step. It made my eyes water. I reached for the handle. It was locked from the outside with a heavy-duty sliding bolt. Why would you bolt the basement door from the outside if your pets were down there? I slid the bolt back. It clanged loudly in the quiet house. I opened the door. The stench that rushed up the stairs was a physical blow. It was the smell of feces, urine, and fear. It was so thick I had to pull my suit jacket over my nose. I flipped the light switch. I walked down the wooden stairs, my heart hammering a warning against my ribs. When I reached the bottom, I gasped. My basement, once a clean workshop where I kept my tools and my fishing gear, had been transformed into a house of horrors. There were not two dogs. Along the walls, stacked too high, were wire cages. Cages meant for rabbits or small cats, not for dogs. And inside them were dogs. Lots of them. I counted quickly. 1, 5, 10, 15. There were French bulldogs. There were Doberman puppies. There were pit bull mixes. 15 dogs crammed into cages so small they could barely turn around. The floor was covered in newspaper that was soaked through with waste. The dogs were skinny, their ribs showing through their fur. Some of them had patches of missing hair, raw red skin exposed from mange. Their eyes were dull and hopeless. When they saw me, they didn't bark aggressively. They didn't growl. They whimpered. It was a chorus of misery. I walked over to the nearest cage. A female French bulldog looked up at me. Her teats were swollen and dragging, a sign that she had been bred over and over again until her body was failing. Her water bowl was bone dry. Her food bowl was filled with cheap, generic kibble that looked like sawdust. This wasn't pet ownership. This wasn't asking Grandpa to watch the family dogs. This was a puppy mill. Hunter was running an illegal breeding operation in my basement. He was breeding these poor animals, forcing them to live in their own filth, likely selling the puppies for thousands of dollars to unsuspecting people online, while the mothers were left here to rot in the dark. I looked at a whiteboard mounted on the wall where my tool rack used to be. It was covered in Hunter's handwriting, names of dogs, due dates, projected profits. Litter A, $15,000. Litter B, $12,000. He was using my electricity to heat the lamps. He was using my water to hose them down. He was using my home to commit a felony. I stood there, in the center of the basement, surrounded by the suffering of innocent creatures. The shock I had felt earlier, the humiliation of the locked door, the anger at the messy kitchen, all of it vanished. In its place, something cold and hard settled in my chest. It was a feeling I hadn't felt since I was a young man facing down a racist supervisor who tried to cut my pay. It was a pure, unadulterated hatred. Hunter Vance wasn't just a lazy son-in-law. He was a monster. And Jasmine, my Jasmine, she knew about this. She had to know. You cannot hide the smell of 15 rotting dogs. She lived here. She walked past this door every day. She had allowed this. She had chosen her husband's greed over basic humanity. I looked at the French bulldog again. She licked the wire of her cage, begging for a drop of water. "I am sorry," I whispered to her. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. It was dead. I remembered I had turned it off. I didn't turn it back on, not yet. I went upstairs to the kitchen sink. I found a clean bowl. I filled it with fresh, cool water. I walked back down the stairs. I opened the cage. The little dog drank so fast I thought she would choke. I watched her drink. Hunter told me to take care of the dogs. He told me to be useful. "All right, Hunter," I said to the empty room. "I will take care of them. And then I am going to take care of you." I walked over to the corner of the basement where I kept my old lockbox. I needed my spare charger, and I needed my contact book. I wasn't going to call the police yet. The police would just arrest him. That was too easy. I wanted to destroy him. I wanted to make sure that when he fell, he never got up again. I looked at the whiteboard again. I looked at the projected profit of $27,000. "You want to play businessman, Hunter," I said, my voice echoing off the concrete walls. "Let us see how you handle a hostile takeover." I took off my charcoal gray suit jacket, the one I had worn to look like a dignified patriarch at the airport, and folded it neatly over a clean plastic chair in the corner of the basement. I loosened my tie and rolled up the sleeves of my white dress shirt. The fabric was stiff with starch, but it was about to get dirty. I could not leave these animals in this condition. I am a man who believes that how you treat the helpless says everything about who you are. Hunter had treated them like inventory. He had stacked them like crates of auto parts waiting to be shipped. But they were living, breathing creatures with hearts that beat in terror. I found a hose connected to the utility sink and turned it on. The water was cold, but clean. I filled every bowl I could find. I watched as the dogs scrambled toward the water. They did not fight each other. They were too weak for that. They just lapped at the water with a desperation that broke my heart. The sound of their tongues hitting the water was the only sound in the basement. I walked over to the female French bulldog I had seen earlier. Her eyes were clouded with infection, and her breathing was labored. I wet a rag and gently wiped the crust from her face. She flinched at first, expecting a hit, but when she realized I was gentle, she leaned her heavy head into my hand. I looked into her eyes, and I saw a reflection that terrified me. I saw myself. For years I had been just like this dog. I had been loyal. I had given everything I had to my family. I had produced for them. I had provided for them. And in return, I was kept in a cage of their expectations, fed scraps of affection only when they needed something from me. Hunter did not see a dog when he looked at her. He saw a $5,000 check, and he did not see a father when he looked at me. He saw a pension fund and a house deed. We were both prisoners in this basement, victims of the same parasite. I spent the next hour working harder than I had in years. I hauled bags of trash up the stairs. I used a shovel to scrape the soiled newspaper from the cages. I hosed down the concrete floor, watching the brown water swirl into the drain. The smell began to fade, replaced by the scent of wet concrete and soap. I found a bag of high-quality dog food hidden behind a stack of boxes, probably the show food Hunter used when he was taking pictures for his website. I ripped it open and filled their bowls. As they ate, the whimpering stopped. A calm silence settled over the room. They looked at me not with fear, but with gratitude. I sat down on an overturned bucket, wiping sweat from my forehead with the back of my arm. I was exhausted, my knees were throbbing, but my mind was clearer than it had been in a decade. I had saved them for tonight. But I knew that as long as Hunter had the keys to this house, they were not safe. And neither was I. I stood up. The physical work was done. Now it was time for the forensic work. I walked up the stairs, locking the basement door behind me, but leaving the bolt undone so I could get back in. I walked through the kitchen, ignoring the mess this time, and headed down the hallway to the room at the end. It used to be my study. It was the room where I kept my jazz records and my collection of vintage automotive manuals. It was the room where I sat and smoked a pipe on Sunday evenings. When Hunter moved in, he demanded the room for his home office. He said he needed a headquarters for his real estate empire. I had given it to him because I wanted him to feel like the man of the house. I wanted him to succeed. The door was locked. Of course it was. Hunter locked everything because secrets thrive in the dark. I did not bother looking for a key. I went to the garage and came back with a heavy steel crowbar. I wedged the flat end into the door frame right near the lock. I did not hesitate. I pulled with all my weight. The wood splintered with a loud crack, and the door popped open. I stepped inside and flipped on the switch. My sanctuary was gone. The walls were covered in whiteboards filled with scribbles about get-rich-quick schemes, cryptocurrency graphs, multi-level marketing structures, pyramid schemes. My jazz records were shoved into a corner, gathering dust. In the center of the room sat a massive mahogany desk that looked far too expensive for a man who claimed to be broke. I walked behind the desk. It was a disaster zone. Unopened letters were piled in teetering stacks. I sat down in his leather chair and began to sift through the paper trail of his life. It was worse than I thought. Much worse. I found a stack of notices from 3 different casinos in Indiana. Hunter Vance had a gambling problem. A big one. I did the math in my head as I flipped through the credit markers. 5,000 here, 10,000 there. He was in the hole for at least $80,000 to the casinos alone. Then I found the tax notices. He hadn't filed taxes for his business in 3 years. The IRS was threatening to garnish wages he didn't even have. But it was the folder at the bottom of the drawer that made my blood turn to ice. It was a red folder, marked with the logo of a predatory lending company. Inside was a document titled Loan Agreement Secured by Real Estate. I put on my reading glasses. I scanned the document. It was a high-interest loan for $150,000. The collateral was my house, the house on Sycamore Street, the house I had paid for with my sweat and blood. I flipped to the last page. My heart stopped. There, at the bottom of the page, was a signature, Albert Robinson. It was my signature. The loop of the R was perfect. The slant of the T was identical to how I signed my checks. But I had never seen this document in my life. It was a forgery, a masterclass in fraud. And right next to it was a date, today's date. There was a sticky note attached to the front of the document. It read, "Notary coming Tuesday at 4 p.m. Make sure the old man is at the airport by 9 a.m. The air left my lungs. This was the plan. The whole trip to Texas, the reunion, the first-class tickets. It wasn't a celebration. It was an extraction. They needed me out of the house so the mobile notary, who was likely bribed or tricked, could come and certify the loan. Hunter was going to mortgage my home to pay off his gambling debts while I was eating barbecue in Houston. If I had gotten on that plane, I would have come home to a foreclosure notice. I stared at the signature again. It was too good. Hunter was a clumsy man. He couldn't even hang a picture frame straight. He didn't have the fine motor skills to forge my signature this perfectly. I closed my eyes, and a memory flashed in my mind. 3 months ago, Jasmine sitting at the kitchen table. "Dad, your hand is shaking a bit when you sign checks," she had said. "Let me help you practice so the bank doesn't reject them." She had sat with me for an hour, watching me sign my name over and over again on a pad of paper. She had studied the way I held the pen. She had traced my signature. She said she was helping me. I opened my eyes and looked at the forgery. It wasn't Hunter's handiwork. It was Jasmine's, my daughter, my little girl. She wasn't just a victim of a bad marriage. She wasn't just a passive wife being bullied by a loud husband. She was the architect. She had practiced my signature. She had helped him plan the dates. She knew about the loan. She knew about the dogs. She knew about the gambling. She had stood at the airport this morning, looking at her phone, avoiding my eyes, not because she was scared of Hunter, but because she was guilty. She was checking the time, waiting for me to leave so the plan could proceed. When Hunter tore up the ticket, she didn't defend me because keeping me home ruined the timeline. That was why she was so panicked on the phone. Not because they missed a flight, but because if I was home, the notary couldn't come. The betrayal hit me harder than the physical exhaustion. It felt like a physical blow to the gut. I had raised a wolf in my own house. I had fed her, clothed her, educated her, and loved her. And in return, she had sharpened her teeth on my bones. I looked at the picture on the desk. It was a framed photo of Hunter and Jasmine on their wedding day. I had paid for that wedding. I had walked her down the aisle. I remembered the way she looked at me that day, with tears in her eyes, saying, "Thank you, Daddy. You made my dreams come true." It was all a lie. I picked up the forged document. I picked up the gambling markers. I picked up the tax notices. I found a large manila envelope and stuffed everything inside. I stood up. I felt heavy, but I also felt dangerous. The sad old man who just wanted his family to love him was gone. He had died in that basement when he looked into the eyes of that suffering dog. The man standing in the office now was the foreman, the man who fired people for safety violations, the man who shut down lines when the product was defective. I walked out of the office. I didn't bother to close the broken door, let it hang open, let the splintered wood serve as a warning. I went back to the kitchen. I needed to make a phone call. I wasn't calling the police yet. That would be too quick. They would get a lawyer. They would weave a story. No, I needed something stronger than handcuffs. I needed an ironclad trap. I picked up my dead phone and plugged it into the charger on the counter. It lit up. I waited for it to reboot. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I was looking for, Saul Stein. He was a labor lawyer I had worked with back in the union days. A short, angry man with a mind like a steel trap. He had retired from labor law and moved into estate litigation. He was known in the city as the Shark. He didn't just win cases, he ate the opposition. I pressed call. It rang twice. "Albert?" Saul's voice was gravelly and surprised. I haven't heard from you since the retirement party. Everything okay? No, Saul, I said, staring at the envelope in my hand. Nothing is okay. I have a situation, a big one. I need you to come over and bring your recorder. What kind of situation? Saul asked. The kind where I need to evict 2 tenants, I said, my voice devoid of emotion, and send them to prison. I am on my way, Saul said. Don't touch anything else. I hung up the phone. I looked around the dirty kitchen. I looked at the basement door. I looked at the ceiling, knowing my bedroom was directly above. They thought I was the dog. They thought they could kick me, starve me, and lock me up. But they forgot one thing about dogs. If you back them into a corner and you threaten their home, they bite. And when they bite, they don't let go until they taste bone. I pulled a chair out from the kitchen table and sat down facing the back door. I placed the envelope on the table in front of me. I folded my hands, and I waited. The sun was starting to set, casting long shadows across the floor. Darkness was coming. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of the dark. I was the one bringing it. I sat at the kitchen table with the manila envelope of evidence resting under my hand. The house was quiet now, except for the occasional sound of the refrigerator compressor humming in the empty room. I looked at the phone in my hand. It was time to make the call that would change everything. I scrolled to the contact named Saul Stein. Saul was not a man you called for a parking ticket. He was not a man you called for a friendly chat about the weather. Saul Stein was a weapon. We had met 30 years ago during the union strikes at the auto plant. Back then, he was a young lawyer with a cheap suit and a burning hatred for injustice. He had stood on the picket line with us when the company brought in scabs. He had fought for our pensions when the executives tried to raid the fund. Now, he was semi-retired, living in a brownstone on the north side. But I knew the fire in his belly had never gone out. People called him the shark, not because he was greedy, but because once he clamped his jaws onto a lie, he never let go until he tasted the truth. I pressed the call button. The line rang once, twice, then a voice that sounded like gravel grinding in a cement mixer answered. Robinson, is that you? It is me, Saul, I said. My voice was steady, but he knew me too well. He could hear the tremor of rage beneath the surface. You sound like you are standing over a body, or about to become one, Saul said. What is the trouble? I am not standing over a body yet, I said, but I have a house full of crimes, Saul. I have forgery, I have animal cruelty, I have fraud, and the perpetrator is family. There was a pause on the other line. I could hear the flick of a lighter and the sharp inhale of a cigar. Saul never gave up the tobacco, even after his doctor begged him to. Family is always the worst, Saul muttered. Is it the daughter or the husband? Both, I said. But the husband is the architect. I need you to come over, Saul. I need you to see this with your own eyes before I call the authorities. I need to know exactly how deep this hole is before I bury them in it. I will be there in 20 minutes, Saul said. Put on a pot of coffee. And Albert, do not touch anything else. If this is a crime scene, treat it like one. 20 minutes later, headlights swept across my front window. I watched as Saul climbed out of his vintage Lincoln town car. He was a small man, barely 5'6", with wild white hair and thick glasses that magnified his eyes. He walked with a cane now, but he moved with a purpose that defied his age. I opened the back door for him. He stepped into the kitchen and immediately wrinkled his nose. Smells like a zoo in here, Saul grunted. It is a zoo, I said. A zoo of horrors. I led him to the kitchen table. I poured him a mug of black coffee. He took a sip and looked at the envelope. Show me, he said. I slid the papers over to him. Saul put on a second pair of glasses over his first ones. He picked up the loan document first. He studied it in silence for a long time. He ran his thumb over the signature. My signature. This is good work, Saul said, his voice void of admiration but full of professional assessment. The pressure points on the pen strokes are almost perfect. If I did not know you were dead averse, I might believe you signed this. Who did it? Jasmine, I said. She practiced my signature for weeks. She said she was helping me improve my handwriting. Saul shook his head slowly. That is Class 3 forgery, Albert. Depending on the amount intended to be stolen, it could be aggravated fraud. And since the loan is for $150,000, we are talking about grand larceny. That is a prison sentence of 3 to 7 years right there. He picked up the gambling markers next. He is a degenerate gambler, Saul stated. 80,000 in debt. That explains the desperation. He is robbing Peter to pay Paul. But you are Peter, and he is trying to kill you financially. Then, I took him to the basement. I watched Saul Stein, a man who had seen the worst of human nature in courtrooms for 40 years, stop at the bottom of the stairs. He looked at the 15 dogs in the cages. He looked at the whiteboard with the breeding schedules. He walked over to a cage and looked at a shivering puppy. "This makes me sick," Saul whispered. "In the state of Illinois, this is aggravated cruelty to animals. It is a Class 4 felony for each animal, Albert. Each one. If he has 15 dogs down here, that is 15 separate counts, plus operating a business without a license, plus tax evasion on the income." Saul turned to me. His eyes behind the thick glasses were hard and cold. "You have enough here to put him away for a decade, Albert. Maybe more. And your daughter. If she knew about this, if she helped him, she is looking at conspiracy charges and aiding and abetting." "I know," I said. "That is why I called you. I want them gone, Saul. I want them out of my house and out of my life. But I want to make sure it sticks. I do not want him plea bargaining down to a misdemeanor because he claims he didn't know or that I gave him permission." Saul nodded and tapped his cane on the concrete floor. "That is the problem," Saul said. "If you call the police right now, Hunter will lie. He is a con man. He will say you agreed to the loan. He will say the dogs are yours and he was just helping you feed them. He will say you are senile and forgot you signed the papers. Without a confession, it becomes a he said, she said battle, and juries can be unpredictable when it involves family disputes." "So, what do we do?" I asked. "We set a trap," Saul said. "A rat trap." We went back upstairs to the kitchen. Saul reached into his briefcase. It was an old, battered leather case that looked like it had survived a war. He pulled out a small black device. It looked like a car key fob. "This is a high-definition voice recorder," Saul explained. "It has a 20-hour battery life and can pick up a whisper from across the room. Here is the plan, Albert." Saul leaned in, his voice dropping low. "You do not call the police tonight. You wait. You let them come home. They are stuck in Chicago right now, probably begging for rides or taking a bus. They will be exhausted, angry, and desperate when they get here. When they walk through that door, they are going to try to manipulate you. Hunter will try to bully you into signing the real notary papers when they arrive, or he will try to get you to cover his tracks. You need to play the part." "Play the part of what?" I asked. "The confused old man," Saul said. "Let them think they still have the upper hand. Let them think you are just a grumpy old father who doesn't understand what is going on. Ask them questions. Ask Hunter about the loan. Ask him about the dogs. Get him to admit it, Albert. Get him to say the words. Get him to say that he forged the signature. Get him to say the breeding business is his. Once you have that on tape, we drop the hammer." I looked at the small black device. It felt heavy in my hand. It was the detonator to my own family. "What about Jasmine?" I asked. Saul looked at me with sympathy. "Give her a chance to come clean," Saul said. "When you are recording, ask her if she knew. If she lies to protect him, then she chooses her fate. But if she breaks, if she tells the truth, maybe we can save her from prison. That is up to you." I nodded. I understood. "I am leaving this with you," Saul said, standing up. "I will be parked down the street tomorrow. I will have the sheriff on speed dial. The moment you get the confession, you text me. I will have the cavalry here in 5 minutes." Saul walked to the door. He paused and looked back at me. "Albert," he said, "this is going to be the hardest thing you have ever done. Sitting there and eating dinner with the man who tried to destroy you. Can you do it? Can you hold your temper long enough to get the truth?" I thought about the tears in my wife's eyes when she made me promise to take care of Jasmine. I thought about the torn ticket on the airport floor. I thought about the dog licking my hand in the basement. "I am not a father anymore, Saul," I said. "Tonight, I am just the foreman, and I have a job to do." Saul nodded and walked out into the night. I locked the door behind him. I held the recorder in my hand. I placed it in the breast pocket of my shirt. I tested it. It was invisible. I went to the pantry and started pulling out ingredients. I was going to cook. I was going to make Jasmine's favorite meal, roast chicken with rosemary and potatoes. I wanted the house to smell like love when they walked in. I wanted the contrast between the warmth of the home and the coldness of their crimes to be unbearable. I peeled the potatoes with steady hands. The knife sliced through the skin, stripping it away to reveal the raw vegetable underneath. That is what I was going to do to Hunter. I was going to strip away every layer of his lies, until the world could see exactly what kind of rot was hiding underneath. The house was silent again, but it was a different kind of silence. It was the silence of a hunter waiting in a blind. The trap was set. The bait was the house itself. Now all I had to do was wait for the rats to return, and I knew they would come. Greed always brings them back. The peace in my house lasted exactly 48 hours. For 2 days, I lived like a king in my own castle. I cleaned the filth they had left behind. I scrubbed the floors until my knees ached, but my spirit soared. I spent hours in the basement with the dogs, nursing them back to health, giving them names and whispering promises that their nightmare was over. But I knew the silence was temporary. I knew the storm was rolling back in from the east. It takes a long time to get from Chicago to our suburb when you have no money, no credit cards, and no friends willing to pick you up. They had to take the Greyhound bus, the one we used to call the dirty dog back in the day. It is a ride that strips away your dignity mile by mile. It smells of diesel fumes and unwashed bodies and desperation. And then, because they couldn't afford a taxi from the station, they had to walk 3 miles in the winter wind. I was sitting in my living room when I saw them coming up the driveway. It was a sight that almost made me smile. Almost. Hunter Vance, the man who bragged about his Italian leather loafers and his silk ties, was dragging his feet like a prisoner on a chain gang. His yellow polo shirt, the one he had worn so arrogantly at the airport, was stained with sweat and dirt. His hair was matted to his forehead. He wasn't carrying his expensive luggage, because that was halfway to Texas by now. He was carrying a plastic grocery bag that looked like it held a bottle of water and a bag of chips. Jasmine was trailing behind him. Her makeup was smeared across her cheeks, giving her the look of a weeping clown. She was limping, likely because those high heels she insisted on wearing were never designed for a 3-mile hike on asphalt. They didn't look like the power couple of real estate anymore. They looked like refugees from a disaster of their own making. They looked like trash that had been thrown out and blown back into the yard by a stiff wind. I checked the time. It was 7 in the evening. The sun had gone down, and the shadows in the living room were long and deep. I didn't turn on the overhead lights. I only turned on the single lamp next to my armchair. I wanted the atmosphere to be heavy. I wanted them to walk into a room that felt like a judge's chambers. I reached down beside my chair and picked up the object I had brought up from the gun safe earlier. It was my old Remington 12-gauge shotgun. It wasn't loaded, of course. I am not a violent man, and I had no intention of shooting anyone. But symbols are powerful things, and in the language of men like Hunter, nothing speaks louder than cold steel and the smell of gun oil. I heard the front door handle jiggle. Then I heard a curse word. Hunter had forgotten that he changed the locks to a code he probably couldn't remember in his exhaustion. He started pounding on the door. "Open up! Open this damn door right now, Albert. I know you are in there. I can see the light." His voice was hoarse, cracked from hours of shouting at airline agents and bus drivers. I didn't move. I waited. Finally, I heard the beep of the electronic lock. He must have remembered the code, or maybe Jasmine did. The door swung open with a violence that made the frame shudder. Hunter stormed in. He brought the smell of the street with him. It was a mix of stale sweat, cheap fast food, and pure, unadulterated rage. He didn't wipe his feet. He stomped onto the hardwood floor, leaving muddy streaks with every step. "Where is he?" Hunter screamed. "Where is that crazy old lunatic?" He marched into the living room, his fists clenched, his eyes wild and bloodshot. He looked like he was ready to kill. He spotted me sitting in the armchair, bathed in the pool of yellow light. "There you are," Hunter roared. He took a step toward me, his hand raised as if he was going to strike a child. "You think this is funny? You think stranding us is funny? I am going to wring your neck, you senile old—" He stopped. He stopped because he heard a sound, a very distinct mechanical sound. Cha-chack. It was the sound of the pump action on the Remington sliding back and forth. Hunter froze mid-stride. His eyes went from my face down to the object resting across my lap. I was running a cleaning rag slowly over the barrel, polishing the metal until it gleamed. I didn't point it at him. I didn't need to. I just held it with the casual familiarity of a man who has hunted his whole life. A man who knows exactly what a trigger feels like. "Sit down, Hunter," I said. My voice was low, barely above a whisper, but it cut through his shouting like a razor blade through silk. Hunter swallowed hard. His Adam's apple bobbed up and down. He looked at the gun, then he looked at me. For the first time since I had known him, he didn't see the checkbook. He didn't see the pushover. He saw the man who had worked in a factory where hot steel and heavy machinery could crush you in a second if you didn't respect them. He saw a man who wasn't afraid. Are you crazy?" Hunter stammered, his voice trembling. "You can't. Put that down, Albert. I didn't say to speak. I said to sit down." I motioned with my head toward the sofa opposite me. Hunter backed up slowly, his hands raised in surrender. He collapsed onto the sofa. Jasmine came in behind him, shivering and pale. When she saw the gun, she let out a small gasp and sat down next to her husband, clutching his arm. "You two look terrible," I said calmly, dipping the rag into the jar of oil. "Did you have a nice trip?" "This isn't funny, Dad," Jasmine cried, her voice thin and reedy. "We have been on a bus for 30 hours. We slept in a station. We haven't eaten a real meal in 2 days. How could you do this to us?" "How could I do this?" I repeated the question, turning it over in my mind. I looked at Hunter. He was staring at the shotgun, terrified that it might go off if he breathed too loud. "I was just following orders," I said. "Hunter told me to go home, so I came home. And since I was home, I decided to do some cleaning." I looked Hunter dead in the eye. "I cleaned the basement, Hunter." The color drained from his face so fast, it looked like he had been slapped with a bag of flour. He knew exactly what that meant. He knew what was in the basement. He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. "I fed the dogs," I continued. "All 15 of them. They were very hungry. Thirsty, too. It seems their caretaker had been neglecting them." Hunter shifted on the sofa. The fear in his eyes began to shift. It was no longer the fear of the gun. It was the fear of exposure. He was running calculations in his head, trying to figure out how much I knew, trying to figure out if I had called the cops. "Dad, listen," Jasmine started, but Hunter cut her off. He placed a hand on her knee to silence her. He took a deep breath. He wiped the sweat from his forehead and hunched his shoulders forward. And then, right before my eyes, the transformation happened. The arrogant bully vanished. The terrified victim vanished. In their place appeared the martyr, the misunderstood hero. Hunter slid off the sofa and fell to his knees on the rug. He actually knelt on the floor, clasping his hands together like a penitent sinner at the altar. Tears began to well up in his eyes. I had to give him credit. If he put this much effort into a real job, he might actually be successful. "Albert, please." Hunter choked out, his voice cracking with emotion. "You have to understand. I didn't want to do it. I was desperate." He looked up at me, the tears now streaming down his dirty cheeks. "I did it for Jasmine," he sobbed. "I did it for this family. The real estate market crashed, Albert. I lost everything. I tried to shield you from it. I tried to protect my wife. I got into debt, trying to keep up our lifestyle, trying to make sure Jasmine had everything she deserved. The dogs, the breeding. It was just a way to make the money back fast, so I could get us out of the hole." He crawled a few inches closer to my chair. I didn't move the gun. "I know it looks bad," he cried. "I know I shouldn't have kept them in the basement, but I was going to move them to a facility next week. I swear. I love those animals. I am not a monster, Albert. I am just a man who tried to do too much for his family and got lost." He looked at Jasmine, and she immediately joined the performance. She slid down next to him, hugging his shoulders, weeping into his stained shirt. "He is telling the truth, Dad," Jasmine wailed. "He works so hard. He was just trying to fix things. We were going to tell you everything after the trip. We were going to pay off the debts and start fresh." Hunter looked up at me with those wet, pleading eyes. "I am so sorry about the airport, Albert. I was out of my mind with stress. The loan sharks. They are threatening me. They said if I don't pay them, they will hurt Jasmine. That is why I needed the money. That is why I needed the mortgage, not for me, for her, to save your daughter." He reached out a hand toward me, palm up, begging for salvation. "Please, Dad, help us one last time. Just sign the papers tomorrow. Let us pay off these bad men. And I promise, I swear on my mother's grave, I will never ask you for another cent. I will work day and night to pay you back. Just don't let them hurt Jasmine." I sat there and watched them. It was a masterclass in manipulation. He had woven a story that touched on every trigger point a father has: protection, danger, redemption. If I was the man I was 2 days ago, I might have believed him. I might have dropped the gun and pulled them into a hug and written a check. But I wasn't that man anymore. I was the man who had seen the forged signature. I was the man who had seen the gambling markers from the casinos. There were no loan sharks. There were only slot machines and poker tables. There was no market crash. There was only laziness and greed. I looked at his tears. They were water, just water. I let a look of hesitation cross my face. I let my shoulders slump slightly, as if the weight of his words was breaking my resolve. I needed them to think they had won. I needed them to think the old fool was buying the bridge they were selling. You did all this for Jasmine?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. "To protect her, yes," Hunter breathed, hoping he had hooked me. "Only for her." I sighed and set the shotgun down on the floor. I rubbed my eyes wearily. "I am an old man, Hunter," I said. "I don't understand all this business finance. I just want my daughter to be safe." "She will be safe," Hunter said eagerly, rising to his feet and helping Jasmine up. "As long as we stick together. We are a family, Albert. We forgive each other." I looked up at him. I saw the glint of victory in his eyes, hidden behind the red rims. He thought he had played me. He thought he was back in control. "Okay," I said softly. "Okay, we will talk about the papers tomorrow. Go get cleaned up. You smell like a sewer." "Thank you, Albert. Thank you," Hunter said. He turned and practically ran toward the stairs, dragging Jasmine with him. He needed to get away before I changed my mind. I watched them go. I listened to their footsteps on the stairs. I listened to the bathroom door close. I picked up the rag and wiped a speck of dust from the barrel of the gun. I wasn't the one who needed protection, and tomorrow, when the trap snapped shut, they would realize that the only shark in this water was the one they had invited into the house. I reached into my pocket and touched the voice recorder. It was humming warm and steady. I had it all. Every lie, every admission. The performance was over. Now it was time for the reviews. I stood over the oven and watched the skin of the roast chicken turn a perfect golden brown. The smell of rosemary, garlic, and lemon filled the kitchen, masking the lingering scent of bleach and despair that had permeated the house just hours before. Cooking has always been my therapy. There is an order to it. You chop the vegetables, you season the meat, you control the heat. If you follow the rules, you get a good result. It is the opposite of the chaos Hunter and Jasmine had brought into my life. I basted the bird one last time, watching the juices run clear. I had prepared a feast. Mashed potatoes with plenty of butter, just the way Jasmine liked them when she was a little girl. Glazed carrots, green beans with bacon. It was a meal meant for a celebration. It was a meal meant for a loving family gathering. But tonight, it was bait. I heard them coming down the stairs. They had showered and changed into the clean clothes I had left folded in the laundry room. Hunter was wearing one of my old flannel shirts that was too tight across his shoulders, and Jasmine was in a pair of sweatpants. They looked stripped down, vulnerable. Without their designer brands and their arrogant postures, they just looked like two people who had lost their way. But I knew better. I knew that beneath the clean skin, the rot was still there. I took the roasting pan out of the oven and set it heavily on the trivet in the center of the dining table. The steam rose up, carrying the promise of comfort. "Sit down," I said. "The food is ready." They sat. They didn't speak. They stared at the food with a hunger that was primal. They hadn't eaten a real meal in 2 days. The bus station vending machines didn't serve roast chicken. I watched Hunter's eyes widen. He licked his lips. For a moment, he forgot about the shotgun. He forgot about the lies. He just wanted to consume. "Go ahead," I said. "We don't need to say grace tonight. I think God is watching closely enough already." Hunter didn't wait. He grabbed a serving spoon and piled potatoes onto his plate. He tore a leg off the chicken with his bare hands, burning his fingers but not caring. Jasmine was more reserved, but I could see her hands shaking as she reached for the water pitcher. I sat at the head of the table. My plate was empty. I wasn't hungry. My stomach was a knot of iron. I rested my hand on my chest, right over the pocket where the voice recorder was humming silently. I watched the meat for a few minutes. The only sound in the room was the scraping of silverware on china and the wet sounds of chewing. It was grotesque. They ate like wolves that had been starved in winter. I let them fill their bellies. I let them get comfortable. A full stomach makes a man lazy. It makes him lower his guard. So, I said, leaning back in my chair, while you are enjoying the meal, maybe you can help me understand something. Hunter froze with a fork halfway to his mouth. He chewed slowly and swallowed. Understand what, Albert? He asked, trying to sound casual, but his eyes darted to the side. I clasped my hands on the table. I am just a retired factory worker, Hunter. I spent my life putting doors on cars. I don't know much about high finance or the modern economy, but I know that a man doesn't turn his basement into a kennel unless he is in trouble. Big trouble. I looked at Jasmine. She was pushing a carrot around her plate, refusing to meet my gaze. Why do you need so much money? I asked. And don't tell me it is just the market. I want the truth. Hunter put his fork down. He wiped his mouth with a napkin. He took a sip of water. I could see the gears turning in his head. He was composing the narrative. He was building the lie. It is complicated, Albert, Hunter began, his voice taking on that smooth, condescending tone he used when he tried to sell a bad house to a young couple. You see, the real estate game has changed. It is all about leverage now. I had a deal, a massive deal, a commercial complex downtown. I put everything we had into the down payment. It was a sure thing, triple returns. He leaned forward, his eyes bright with the fever of the con. But the city delayed the permits, bureaucracy, red tape. My liquidity dried up. I just needed a bridge, Albert. A short-term infusion of cash to keep the investors happy until the permits cleared. That is all. And the dogs, I asked. What about the dogs downstairs? Hunter let out a short, dismissive laugh. That is actually a brilliant side venture. Those aren't just stray dogs, Albert. Those are high-value genetic assets. French bulldogs with rare coat colors, fluffy carriers. Do you know how much a platinum Frenchie sells for? $10,000. Easy. He gestured with his fork, getting excited by his own fabrication. I wasn't running a puppy mill. I was building a boutique breeding program. High-end, exclusive. I calculated the ROI. In 6 months, that basement operation would have generated $200,000. Pure profit. I was going to use that to pay off the real estate debts, and then surprise you. I was going to buy you a new truck, Albert. I was doing it for us. I looked at Jasmine. She was nodding along, but her face was pale. Is that true, Jasmine? I asked. Is that what this was? A brilliant business move? She looked up at me. Her eyes were wet. It is true, Dad, she whispered. Hunter is a visionary. He thinks big. We just got caught in a cash flow crunch. That is why we couldn't pay the taxes. That is why we needed the mortgage. It wasn't to gamble. It wasn't for anything bad. We were just trying to save the investment. I felt the recorder vibrating against my chest. I had the first lie. Now I needed the bigger one. I tapped my finger on the table. So, there is no gambling debt? I asked clearly. I want to be sure. You don't owe money to casinos. You don't owe money to bookies. Hunter looked me dead in the eye. A man who was $80,000 in the hole. No, he said firmly. Absolutely not. I don't gamble, Albert. You know that. I am a businessman. I take calculated risks. I don't play games of chance. I nodded slowly. I picked up my wine glass and swirled the red liquid. I see, I said. So if I were to check the public records in Indiana, I wouldn't find any liens against you from the casinos. Hunter didn't blink, but a drop of sweat rolled down his temple. Of course not, he said. That is ridiculous. Who told you that? Nobody, I said. Just checking. You hear stories. I cut a piece of meat on my plate, though I didn't eat it. So this plan of yours, I said, this breeding program, the commercial complex, it all depends on you getting cash right now. Exactly, Hunter said. He sensed an opening. He sensed that I was buying the story. He leaned across the table, his face earnest. And that is where we are stuck, Albert. The banks are too slow. They take weeks to approve a loan. We don't have weeks. We have days. If I don't pay the bridge loan by Friday, we lose the commercial deal. We lose everything. He reached out and covered my hand with his. His palm was clammy. That is why I needed you to go to Texas. I didn't want to worry you with the details. I just wanted to get the paperwork done so I could save the family fortune. I was trying to protect you from the stress. I pulled my hand away slowly. You were trying to protect me, I repeated, by forging my signature. Hunter flinched. He looked at Jasmine. She bit her lip. It wasn't a forgery, Dad, Jasmine said softly. I mean, technically it was, but I knew you would agree. I knew you would want to help us. I just signed it to speed things up. It was implied consent. Implied consent, I said the words carefully. So you admit you signed my name on a loan document for $150,000 without asking me. We were going to tell you, Hunter interjected quickly. Tonight. We were going to tell you tonight. After the trip. We would have had the check in hand. We would have paid off the loan in 3 months. You wouldn't have lost a dime. I sat back in my chair. I looked at the ceiling. I looked at the chandelier that I had polished last week. So let me get this straight, I said. You are not gamblers. You are savvy investors. The dogs are not victims. They are assets. And stealing my house was actually an act of love to save the family fortune. Yes, Hunter said. Yes, Albert, exactly. I looked down at them. They looked so hopeful. They thought they had done it. They thought they had spun the web tight enough to catch the old fly. Well, I said, that changes things. Hunter's face lit up. It does? He asked. I nodded. I thought you were just wasting money, I said. But if this is a legitimate business deal, if this is about saving our future, then I should help. Jasmine let out a sob of relief. Oh, thank you, Dad. Thank you. Hunter stood up. He was energized now. The fatigue was gone. He ran to the hallway where he had dropped the plastic bag he brought from the bus station. He rummaged through it and pulled out a folder. It wasn't the red folder from his office. It was a new one, a clean one. He came back to the table and placed it in front of me. He pulled a pen from his pocket. This is it, Albert, he said, his voice trembling with excitement. This is the insurance policy. I opened the folder. It was a quitclaim deed and a power of attorney. It wasn't just a loan. He was trying to get me to sign over the title of the house to him. What is this, Hunter? I asked, feigning confusion. This doesn't look like a loan. It is better than a loan, Hunter said, speaking fast. This gives me the power to negotiate directly with the investors. It puts the house in my name temporarily, so I can leverage my credit score, which is recovering. It is just a formality, an insurance policy. Once the deal closes, I transfer it right back to you. He clicked the pen. He held it out to me. Just sign right there, Albert, by the X. It is just a piece of paper. But it will give me the capital to pay back the airline tickets, fix up the basement, and get us all back on track. I will even pay you double the cost of the tickets. I promise. I looked at the paper. I looked at the pen. I looked at my daughter. You want me to sign this, Jasmine? I asked. You want me to give him my house? Jasmine nodded. Her eyes were pleading. Please, Dad, just trust him. It is the only way. I took the pen. I felt the weight of it. It was a cheap plastic pen. I looked at Hunter. You swear on your life that this money is for a business deal? I asked. I swear, Hunter said, on my life. And you swear you will give the house back? In a heartbeat, he said. I lowered the pen to the paper. I watched their breath hitch. They were watching the tip of the pen like it was a diamond. I touched the paper. I started to write. A, L, B, then I stopped. I looked up at Hunter. I let the mask slip, just a little. You know, Hunter, I said, there is one thing about dogs you forgot. What? Hunter asked, his eyes glued to the paper. What is that? I put the pen down. Dogs can smell fear, I said, and they can smell a lie. I reached into my shirt pocket. I pulled out the small black recorder. The red light was glowing steady and bright. I placed it on the table between the roast chicken and the deed to my house. Hunter stared at it. He blinked. He looked at me. What is that? He whispered. That, I said, my voice turning to ice, is the truth, and I think we have enough of it now. I picked up my phone, which was sitting on the napkin. I pressed one button. A text message sent to Saul Stein. Now. I looked at Hunter and smiled, a cold, foreman smile. Enjoy your chicken, Hunter, I said. It is the last good meal you are going to have for a very long time. The cheap blue plastic pen felt heavy in my hand. It weighed less than an ounce, but in that moment, it felt like I was holding a sledgehammer. I held it, hovering over the signature line of the quitclaim deed. My hand trembled. I made sure it trembled. I wanted them to see the frailty of an old man. I wanted them to see a father who was scared and confused and ready to give up. I watched Hunter's eyes. They were locked onto the tip of that pen like a shark smelling blood in the water. He was holding his breath. His chest was tight. He was so close to getting everything he wanted. The house, the equity, the freedom to gamble it all away again. Jasmine was gripping the edge of the dining table, her knuckles white. She looked like she was about to throw up. Good. She should feel sick. I lowered the pen to the paper. I let the tip touch the fiber. A tiny dot of ink appeared. Hunter let out a tiny exhale, a sound of pure greed escaping his lips. But then I stopped. I pulled the pen back. I looked up at the ceiling and let out a long sigh. I do not know, Hunter, I said, my voice wavering. It is a lot of money. The house is all I have left. If this business of yours fails, I will be on the street. It will not fail, Albert, Hunter said quickly, his voice rising in panic. It cannot fail. It is guaranteed. Just sign the paper. I shook my head slowly. I put the pen down on the table. The click sounded like a gunshot in the silent room. I need to see them again, I said. See what? Hunter asked, blinking rapidly. The assets, I said. The dogs. If they are the guarantee for this loan, I want to see them one more time. I want to understand exactly what I am investing in. Hunter groaned. He ran a hand through his messy hair. Albert, they are just dogs. You saw them 2 days ago. They are in the basement. It smells down there. You do not want to go down there. Just sign the paper and I will take pictures for you later. No, I said firmly. I pushed my chair back. If I am signing over my life's work, I want to see the collateral. Take me downstairs, Hunter, or I do not sign. I saw the flash of anger in his eyes. He wanted to scream. He wanted to grab my hand and force the pen across the page. But he couldn't. He needed me willing. He needed the signature to look voluntary. He forced a smile that looked more like a grimace. Fine, he spat out. Fine. If it will make you sign, let us go look at the damn dogs. He snatched the deed and the pen off the table. He marched toward the basement door. Jasmine stayed at the table, her head in her hands. She could not face it. She knew what was down there. She knew what was about to happen. I followed Hunter to the basement door. Before I stepped through, I reached up and adjusted the collar of my shirt. I felt the small, hard button of the camera lens hidden there. I reached into my pocket and tapped the record button on the device Saul had given me just to be sure. The red light was already steady. We were live. Hunter stomped down the wooden stairs. I followed slowly, gripping the handrail. The smell hit us halfway down. Even after my cleaning session, the scent of confinement and misery still lingered in the concrete. Hunter flipped on the lights. The fluorescent tubes flickered and buzzed, casting a sickly pale light over the cages. There, Hunter said, sweeping his arm across the room. There are your assets. Are you happy now? Can we go back upstairs? I walked into the center of the room. The dogs were quiet. They remembered me. They remembered the water and the food. They watched me with soulful eyes. I stopped in front of a cage containing a pregnant bulldog. She looked miserable. Her belly distended, her breathing shallow. Explain it to me, Hunter, I said, playing the fool. I am just a factory worker. I do not understand how a few dogs can pay off a $150,000 loan. It does not make sense to me. Hunter sighed, the sound of a genius forced to explain calculus to a toddler. He walked over to me, clutching the clipboard to his chest. It is a numbers game, Albert, he said, his arrogance starting to leak out. He couldn't help himself. He loved to hear himself talk. He loved to feel smarter than the black man who paid his bills. You see this dog? He pointed at the bulldog. She is going to have 6 puppies, minimum. Because of her color pattern, each puppy is worth $5,000. That is $30,000 from one litter. He walked down the line, tapping on the cages. This one, $30,000. That one, $20,000. I have 15 females here, Albert. Do the math. In 1 year, I can churn out $300,000 of inventory. And the best part? He leaned in close, a conspiratorial grin on his face. The IRS does not know about it. It is a cash business. No taxes. No government taking a cut. I pocket every single dime. I nodded slowly, acting impressed. But is that not illegal, Hunter? I asked. Tax evasion. Operating without a license. Hunter laughed. a loud, barking laugh that echoed off the cold walls. "It is only illegal if you get caught, Albert, and I am too smart to get caught. I have buyers lined up online, crypto payments, untraceable. The government is for suckers. People like you who work 9 to 5 and pay your taxes, you are the suckers. People like me, we create our own rules." He looked at me with pure condescension. "That is why you need to sign the house over to me. You are too old to understand how the modern world works. You are a dinosaur, Albert. You built cars. I build wealth. Let me handle the business. You just sit in your recliner and watch your shows. I will make us rich." I looked at the camera lens in my mind's eye. I hoped it caught the gleam of greed in his pupils. I hoped it caught the way he sneered at the law. "And the loan?" I asked. "The one you forged my name on?" "That was part of the plan, too." Hunter rolled his eyes. He was getting impatient. "It wasn't a forgery, Albert. It was a creative solution. I needed seed money to buy more cages, to expand. I did what I had to do. You were too stubborn to lend me the money, so I borrowed your credit. It is victimless crime. Once the puppies sell, I pay off the loan and nobody gets hurt." He shoved the clipboard into my chest. "Now sign the paper. We are wasting time." I looked at him. I looked at the dogs. I looked at the whiteboard, where he had calculated his profits based on their suffering. "You are right, Hunter," I said. "I am a dinosaur. I believe in things like hard work, and honesty, and paying your debts." I took the clipboard. I took the cheap blue pen. Hunter watched me. He was practically vibrating. This was it. The moment he became the owner of the house on Sycamore Street. I placed the paper against the wall next to the bulldog's cage. I clicked the pen. I started to write. I wrote a G. Hunter leaned in. "Good. Good." I wrote an O. He frowned. "Go. That is not your name." I wrote a T and an O. "Go to." Hunter read aloud, confusion clouding his face. "What are you doing, Albert?" I didn't stop. I pressed down hard on the paper, ripping through the fiber. H-E-L-L. Go to hell. I finished the last L with a violent slash that tore the paper in half. I turned around and threw the clipboard at him. It hit him in the chest and clattered to the floor. "What the hell is this?" Hunter screamed, picking up the torn paper. "Have you lost your mind, old man?" "No, Hunter," I said. My voice wasn't wavering anymore. It was booming. It was the voice of the foreman, shouting over the roar of the assembly line. "I have found my mind." I reached into my shirt pocket. I pulled out the small black box. The red light was burning like a laser eye. I held it up to his face. "I recorded it, Hunter," I said. "I recorded every word." Hunter stared at the device. He blinked. "What?" he whispered. "I recorded the tax evasion." I continued stepping toward him. "I recorded the puppy mill. I recorded the forgery. And right now, the camera on my button is recording your ugly face as you realize your life is over." Hunter looked at my shirt. He saw the tiny lens. He looked back at the recorder. His face went pale white. You set me up," he stammered. "I didn't set you up," I said. "I just gave you enough rope, and you just hung yourself." Hunter looked at the stairs. He looked at me. A dangerous light entered his eyes. He realized he was cornered. He realized there was no way out. He dropped his hands into fists. "Give me that recorder," he growled, stepping toward me. I didn't flinch. I stood my ground. "You can try to take it, Hunter," I said. "But remember, I spent 40 years lifting steel. You spent 40 years lifting forks." I reached into my pocket with my other hand and pulled out my phone. I held it up. The screen showed a text message I had sent 2 minutes ago. It said, "Now." And then from the driveway above us we heard it, the sound of sirens. Not one, but 3. Blue and red lights flashed against the basement window wells, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. Hunter froze. He looked up at the ceiling as the sound of heavy boots hit the front porch. Boom, boom, boom. "Police, open up." I smiled at my son-in-law. "I think your ride is here, Hunter," I said. "And this time, you are not going to need a ticket." The look in Hunter's eyes changed in a fraction of a second. It shifted from the terrified realization of a man caught in a lie to the desperate violence of a trapped animal. He realized that the small black box in my hand was not just a recorder. It was the end of his life. It was the end of the fake real estate empire. It was the end of the designer suits and the leased luxury cars. It was a one-way ticket to a prison cell, and he knew it. He let out a guttural roar that sounded less like a human and more like a beast. He lunged at me. His hands were claws reaching for the recorder. He wanted to crush it. He wanted to destroy the evidence. He thought that if he could just break that piece of plastic, he could rewrite history. I did not move backward. I planted my feet. I tightened my grip on the device and prepared to take the hit. I was 68 years old, and my joints were stiff, but I had spent 40 years on a factory floor moving heavy steel. I was made of iron, and he was made of dough. But the blow never came. Before Hunter could reach me, the heavy oak front door upstairs exploded inward with a sound that shook the foundation of the house. It was a boom so loud it made the dust fall from the basement rafters. Hunter froze in midair, his hands inches from my chest. His eyes darted up toward the ceiling. Then came the thunder. It was the sound of heavy boots hitting hardwood floors. Not one pair, but a dozen. It sounded like a stampede. "Police! Search warrant! Everybody down!" The voices were booming and authoritative, overlapping each other. I heard the crash of the kitchen door being kicked open. I heard the shouting of commands. I heard Jasmine scream a high-pitched sound of pure terror that cut through the noise. Hunter stumbled back, his face drained of all color, turning a sickly shade of gray. He looked at me, and for the first time I saw the arrogance completely vanish. He wasn't the master of the house anymore. He was just a criminal standing in a basement full of evidence. I looked at him calmly. I put the recorder back in my pocket and buttoned the flap. "I told you, Hunter," I said, my voice steady amidst the chaos above. I inspected the line, and I called the supervisors. Hunter turned to run toward the back exit of the basement, the one that led to the yard. But he was too slow, and he was too late. The door at the top of the stairs flew open, and the beam of a tactical flashlight cut through the gloom, blinding us both. "Freeze! Police! Show me your hands!" The officer at the top of the stairs didn't wait for an invitation. He descended the wooden steps with his weapon drawn, moving with practiced speed. Behind him was another officer, and then men in uniforms that said animal control. Hunter threw his hands up, but he didn't stop moving. He was panicking. He backed away, knocking into a stack of cages. The impact sent a ripple of fear through the animals. The dogs began to bark. It started as a whimper and grew into a cacophony of howling and yelping. The sound was deafening in the enclosed concrete space. "Get on the ground!" the officer shouted. "Get on the ground now!" Hunter didn't get on the ground. He tried to speak. He tried to use that smooth salesman voice that had worked on so many people before. "Wait, officer," he stammered, raising his hands higher. "This is a misunderstanding. This is my father-in-law's house. I was just helping him. These are his dogs. He is senile. He doesn't know what he is doing." I stood perfectly still. I kept my hands visible. I didn't say a word. I let him dig his hole. The officer didn't care about Hunter's story. He saw the cages. He saw the filth. He saw the frantic man refusing to comply. I said, "Get on the ground." 2 more officers rushed past me. They grabbed Hunter by the arms. He struggled. He actually tried to pull away. It was a mistake. One of the officers swept his leg, and Hunter went down hard. He landed face first on the concrete floor, the same floor he had covered in newspaper and dog waste. His expensive face hit the muck. His cheek was pressed against the cold, wet cement. "Ow! You are hurting me," Hunter screamed. "I have rights. You can't do this. I am a businessman." "You are under arrest for aggravated animal cruelty and fraud," the officer said, snapping the handcuffs onto Hunter's wrists. The metal clicked shut with a sound that was sweeter to my ears than any jazz record I owned. Hunter writhed on the floor, trying to keep his face out of the dirt, but the officer held him down firmly. "Albert, tell them," Hunter shrieked, twisting his neck to look at me. "Tell them this is your operation. Tell them I had nothing to do with it. Help me." I looked down at him. I looked at the man who had called me useless, the man who had torn my ticket, the man who had treated living creatures like inventory. "I don't know who you are," I said clearly so every officer in the room could hear. "I came home from a trip and found an intruder in my basement running a puppy mill. I have never seen this man do an honest day's work in his life." "Liar," Hunter screamed, spitting saliva onto the floor. "You old liar. I will kill you." The officer jerked Hunter to his feet. "That is a threat against a witness," the officer noted. "Add it to the list." While the police were handling Hunter, the animal control team moved in. They were gentle. They moved with compassion. They opened the cages one by one. I watched as a young woman lifted the pregnant bulldog into her arms. The dog didn't struggle. She rested her head on the woman's shoulder and closed her eyes. "It is okay, girl," the woman whispered. "You are safe now." I felt a lump in my throat. They were safe. I had done it. I had saved them from the monster. The basement was a swirl of activity. Flashlights swept across the whiteboards, documenting the breeding schedules and the profit projections. Cameras flashed, taking pictures of the conditions. Every photo was another nail in Hunter's coffin. Every piece of evidence I had gathered was being validated by the law. I stood in the corner, out of the way, watching my world being cleansed. It was chaotic and loud and smelled of justice. Suddenly, I heard footsteps running down the stairs. They were light, frantic footsteps. Jasmine burst into the room. She was wearing the sweatpants I had given her, but her face was wild. She had been held upstairs by the other officers, but she must have broken free or been allowed to come down to identify her husband. She saw the police. She saw the cages being emptied. And then, she saw Hunter. He was being led toward the stairs. His head hung low, his hands cuffed behind his back. "Hunter!" Jasmine screamed. She ran toward him, but an officer stepped in her path, blocking her. "Ma'am, stay back." Jasmine stopped. She looked at her husband. Then she turned her head and looked at me. Her eyes were not filled with relief that the dogs were being saved. They were not filled with shame for what they had done. They were filled with accusation. "Dad!" she screamed. Her voice cracked with hysteria. "What did you do?" I looked at her. I waited for her to ask about the dogs. I waited for her to apologize. "You called them," she yelled, pointing a shaking finger at me. "You called the police on us. How could you? He is my husband. He is family." I stepped forward. The officers parted to let me speak. "He is a criminal, Jasmine," I said. "Look around you. Look at this misery. Look at what he did to my house. Look at what he did to these animals. He was doing it for us." Jasmine sobbed, stomping her foot like a petulant child. "He was trying to make money. He was trying to fix everything. You didn't have to ruin him. You could have just signed the paper. You could have helped us." I stared at her. I looked for the little girl I had raised. I looked for the woman I thought had a conscience. But I didn't see her. I only saw a reflection of Hunter. She had been infected by his greed. She had been twisted by his entitlement. "I didn't ruin him, Jasmine," I said, my voice cold and final. "He ruined himself, and you helped him. You forged my signature. You hid the tax notices. You lived in this house and walked past this door every day while these animals suffered. I didn't know it was this bad." She lied. I knew she was lying. "You knew," I said. "You knew everything." Jasmine wiped her eyes. Her face hardened. "Fine," she spat. "Send him to jail. But you are going to lose me too, Dad. If you let them take him, I will never speak to you again. I will never visit you. You will die alone in this big, empty house. Is that what you want?" She thought that was a threat. She thought her presence was the only thing giving my life meaning. She didn't realize that her presence had become a poison. I looked at the empty cages. I looked at the officers leading Hunter up the stairs. "I am not afraid of being alone, Jasmine," I said. "I am afraid of living with snakes." "Hunter isn't a snake," she shrieked. "He is a businessman. He is my husband." I shook my head slowly. "No, Jasmine," I said. "He is not a husband, and he is not a businessman. He is a parasite. He attaches himself to a host, and he sucks it dry until there is nothing left. He did it to me. He did it to these dogs, and he did it to you." I took a step closer to her. "And the saddest part, Jasmine," I said softly, "is that you let him. You became a parasite too. You fed off my love and my money, and you gave me nothing but lies in return." I turned my back on her. "Officers," I said to the policeman standing near the stairs, "please remove these trespassers from my property." "Trespassers?" Jasmine gasped. "I am your daughter." "Not tonight," I said, walking toward the stairs without looking back. "Tonight you are just another accomplice." I walked up the stairs, leaving her screaming in the basement. I walked into my kitchen, which was now filled with more police officers. I walked out onto my front porch and took a deep breath of the cold night air. I watched as they brought Hunter out in handcuffs and put him in the back of a squad car. I watched as Jasmine was led out, crying not for her sins, but for her loss of status. I stood there alone. The house was empty. The dogs were gone. The children were gone. But for the first time in years, the air around me felt clean. As the red and blue lights of the squad car faded into the distance, taking my son-in-law to the county jail, a heavy silence descended upon the house. It was not a peaceful silence. It was the vacuum left after a bomb goes off. Jasmine stood in the center of the living room, shivering in her thin sweatpants. Her face was streaked with mascara and snot. She looked at the empty doorway where her husband had just been dragged out in handcuffs, and then she looked at me. I could see the wheels turning in her head. She was calculating. Hunter was gone. The scheme was busted. Now she had to pivot. She had to survive. She took a step toward me, opening her mouth to launch into a speech about how she was a victim too, about how he forced her to do it. But before she could speak, a black Lincoln town car pulled into the driveway. The heavy door opened, and Saul Stein stepped out. He walked up the driveway with his cane, the sound of the metal tip striking the pavement, echoing like a ticking clock. He did not look at Jasmine. He walked straight to me and handed me a thick envelope. Then he turned to my daughter. "Who are you?" Jasmine asked, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. Her voice was shrill, defensive. "I am your father's attorney," Saul said. His voice was like grinding stones. "And I am the man who is going to ensure that you do not spend another night under this roof." He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a single sheet of paper with a red stamp on it. He held it out to her. She did not take it, so he let it drop onto the coffee table in front of her. "This is an emergency eviction notice," Saul stated. "Under Illinois state law, a tenancy at will can be terminated immediately if the tenant is using the property for criminal enterprise. We have video evidence of animal cruelty, tax evasion, and fraud committed on these premises. As of this moment, your right to reside here is revoked." Jasmine stared at the paper as if it were a venomous snake. "Eviction," she gasped. "You cannot evict me. I am his daughter. This is my childhood home." "It is not your home," Saul corrected her. "It is Mr. Robinson's property. You are an adult guest who has violated the terms of hospitality in the most egregious way possible. You have 24 hours to remove your personal effects and vacate the premises. If you are still here at this time tomorrow, the sheriff will return to remove you physically for trespassing. 24 hours. Jasmine screamed. She looked at me, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Dad, say something. You are not going to let him do this. I have nowhere to go. Hunter is in jail. I have no money." I looked at her. I looked at the daughter I had carried on my shoulders, the daughter I had taught to drive, the daughter I had bailed out of trouble more times than I could count. "Saul is right," I said. My voice was tired, but it did not waver. "You turned my home into a crime scene, Jasmine. You let that man abuse animals in my basement. You tried to steal the deed to this house. You lost the right to call this place home the moment you signed my name on that fake loan. But I am your flesh and blood," she wailed. "And that is the only reason you are not in the back of that police car with your husband right now," I said. "Saul convinced me not to press charges against you for the forgery. Yet, that is my gift to you, my final gift, your freedom. Do not waste it by arguing about the house." Jasmine looked from me to Saul. She saw the wall of ice in our eyes. She realized that the tantrums that had worked for 32 years were useless. The safety net was gone. She let out a scream of frustration and ran up the stairs. We heard the slamming of her bedroom door. Saul looked at me. "Are you okay, Albert?" he asked. "I will be," I said. "Once the cancer is cut out, the body can start to heal." The next morning, the house was filled with the sounds of frantic movement. Jasmine was running back and forth, dragging suitcases from the attic. She was trying to pack a life into 3 bags. I sat in my armchair, drinking coffee and watching her. It was a pathetic sight. She was grabbing things at random. Designer purses, shoes, jewelry. Things she thought had value. Things she thought defined her. She tried to take the television from the guest room. "Put it back," I said without looking up from my newspaper. "I bought that in 2018. I have the receipt." She froze. She glared at me, but she put it back. She went to the kitchen and started packing the expensive espresso machine. "That was a Christmas gift from me to the house," I said. "Put it back." She screamed and threw the portafilter into the sink. "What can I take?" she shrieked. What is mine? Anything you paid for with your own money, I said. She stopped. She looked around the room. She looked at the furniture, the electronics, the art on the walls. She looked down at her hands. She realized with a dawning horror that she owned nothing, absolutely nothing. Every stick of furniture, every appliance, every luxury item had been paid for by me or bought on credit by Hunter using money he didn't have. She was 32 years old, and she didn't even own a toaster. She ran out to the driveway to load her suitcases into the BMW. I followed her out. The tow truck was already there. A large man in a jumpsuit was hooking chains to the axle of the luxury car. "Hey," Jasmine yelled, running down the steps. "What are you doing? That is my car. Leave it alone." The driver didn't even look at her. He looked at his clipboard. "Repo order, ma'am. Payments are 4 months behind. Leased to a Mr. Hunter Vance. Since he is currently being processed by the county, the dealership ordered an immediate tow." "But I need that car," Jasmine begged, grabbing the driver's arm. "It is how I am going to leave. Please, just give me 1 day." "Lady, get off me," the driver said, shaking her arm loose. "Take it up with the bank." He pulled the lever, and the BMW rose into the air. Jasmine watched as her symbol of status, her ride to freedom, was hoisted up like a dead carcass. The truck drove away, leaving her standing on the pavement with 3 suitcases and nowhere to put them. She stood there for a long time, staring at the empty spot where the car had been. The wind whipped her hair across her face. She looked small. She looked defeated. She turned slowly and walked back to the porch where I was standing. She didn't scream this time. She didn't yell. She collapsed onto the bottom step and buried her face in her hands. "Dad," she whispered, "please, I am begging you. I have nothing. I have no car. I have no money. Hunter emptied our joint account before we left for the trip. I can't even get a hotel room." She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. "Are you really going to throw me on the street? I am your daughter. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake. But do I deserve to be homeless?" I looked down at her. Part of me, the part that remembered her as a toddler, wanted to reach into my wallet and give her $1,000. Wanted to call her a cab. Want to fix it. But I remembered the dogs. I remembered the basement. I remembered the forgery. I reached into my pocket. I walked down the steps and stood in front of her. "I am not throwing you on the street, Jasmine," I said. "I am giving you a chance to stand on your own 2 feet for the first time in your life." I held out my hand. She looked at it, expecting cash, expecting a credit card. Instead, she saw a piece of paper. It was a bus ticket, a Greyhound ticket, one way, to Cleveland. "Cleveland?" she asked, looking at the ticket as if it were written in alien script. "Why Cleveland?" "That is where Hunter's mother lives," I said. "She is the only family you have left who might be willing to take you in. I called her this morning. She said you can sleep on her couch if you help with the chores." "Cleveland," Jasmine repeated, her voice cracking. "But Dad, that is 400 miles away, and it is a bus, a Greyhound. It is good enough for the rest of America, Jasmine," I said. "And it was good enough for you 2 days ago when you came crawling back here to lie to me." I tucked the ticket into her hand. "Or," I said, pointing toward the main road, "you can walk into town. I hear the diner is hiring waitresses, minimum wage plus tips. It is honest work. It is hard work. It is the kind of work that pays for your own toaster." "Dad, please," she grabbed my leg, hugging my calf. "Don't do this. Let me stay. I will clean. I will cook. I will do anything." I pulled my leg away gently, but firmly. "You had 32 years to be a daughter, Jasmine," I said. 32 years of love and support, and you repaid me by trying to sell my home out from under me." I picked up her heaviest suitcase and set it on the sidewalk. "The bus leaves in an hour," I said. "You can call an Uber to the station if you have any battery left on your phone. If not, you better start walking." I turned around and walked up the steps to my front door. "Dad!" she screamed one last time. "Dad, look at me!" I stopped. I didn't turn around. "I have looked at you, Jasmine," I said, "and I didn't see myself. I saw a stranger." I stepped inside and closed the heavy oak door. I turned the deadbolt. I heard her sobbing on the lawn. I heard her cursing my name. I heard the sound of her dragging the suitcases down the driveway, the wheels clattering on the uneven pavement. I walked into the kitchen and poured the rest of my coffee down the sink. It was cold. I rinsed the cup and placed it in the dishwasher. The house was quiet. It was finally, truly quiet. I walked to the window and watched her figure retreating down the street, dragging her baggage behind her. She looked small against the gray sky. "Goodbye, Jasmine," I whispered. I didn't feel happy, but I felt light. The weight of the parasite was gone. I was 68 years old. I had a paid-off house. I had my dignity. And for the first time in a long time, I had my life back. I turned away from the window and went to find the number for the shelter where they had taken the dogs. I had a donation to make. 3 months passed between the night the police raided my home and the day I sat in the Cook County courthouse waiting for the gavel to fall. They say the wheels of justice grind slowly, but they grind exceedingly fine. For those 90 days, I lived in a strange limbo. The house on Sycamore Street was quiet. Too quiet. I had cleaned every inch of it, scrubbing away the physical filth Hunter and Jasmine had left behind. But I could not scrub away the memories. Every time I walked past the basement door, I smelled the phantom scent of bleach and fear. Every time I sat at the dining room table, I saw the ghost of my daughter forging my signature. I realized then that a house is just wood and brick. It is the people inside who make it a home. And without the people, my house was just a structure holding up a roof. The courtroom smelled of floor wax and old paper. It was a smell I associated with seriousness and finality. I sat in the second row wearing the same charcoal gray suit I had worn to the airport the day Hunter tore my ticket. It felt like armor. I kept my back straight, my hands folded on my lap. I was not there to gloat. I was not there to cheer. I was there to witness the end of a transaction. When the bailiff announced the arrival of the defendant, I watched the side door. Hunter Vance walked in. He was not wearing his Italian loafers or his silk ties. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit that was 2 sizes too big for him. He had lost weight. His hair, once styled with expensive gel, was limp and greasy. He shuffled in shackles, the metal clinking with every step. He looked small. Without his props, without his leased cars and his borrowed money, he was just a scared man who had gambled and lost. He scanned the room, looking for a friendly face. He looked for Jasmine, but she was not sitting behind the defense table. She was sitting in the back row, as far away from him as possible, wearing a cheap coat and staring at the floor. She had filed for divorce 3 days after his arrest. Rats do not cling to a sinking ship. They swim. Hunter's eyes finally met mine. For a moment, I expected to see the old arrogance, the sneer that said he knew better than me. But it was gone. In its place was a hollow, pleading look. He wanted me to save him. He wanted the old man to open his checkbook and make the bad things go away. I held his gaze for a second, and then I looked at the judge. I had nothing left to give him. "Mr. Robinson," the prosecutor called my name. "Please take the stand." I walked to the witness box. I placed my hand on the Bible. My palm was calloused from 40 years of labor. I swore to tell the truth, and that is exactly what I did. The prosecutor asked me about the dogs. He asked me about the loan. He asked me about the threats. Hunter's lawyer tried to paint me as a confused senior citizen, tried to suggest that I had misunderstood the arrangement, that I had verbally agreed to the business. "Mr. Robinson," the defense attorney asked, "is it not true that you wanted to help your family financially? Is it not possible that in your advanced age you simply forgot that you authorized your son-in-law to manage your assets?" I leaned into the microphone. I looked at the jury. 12 ordinary people. I wanted them to understand. "I may be 68 years old," I said, my voice filling the room without shouting, "but my mind is as sharp as the day I retired as foreman. I did want to help my family. I gave them a roof over their heads. I gave them food. I gave them love. But I never gave them permission to turn my home into a dungeon." I looked at Hunter. "I trusted this man with my most precious asset," I said, "my daughter, and he broke her. I trusted him with my home, and he defiled it." A man who can look into the eyes of a suffering animal and calculate profit is not a businessman. He is a monster. And a man who steals from the father who fed him is not family. He is a thief. I am not confused, counselor. I am heartbroken, because I thought I was raising a successor, but I was just harboring a criminal. The courtroom was silent. The defense attorney sat down. He had no more questions. There were no questions left to ask. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. When they returned, the verdict was unanimous. Guilty on 15 counts of aggravated animal cruelty. Guilty on 1 count of felony fraud. guilty on one count of tax evasion. The judge was a stern woman with glasses perched on the end of her nose. She looked at Hunter with pure disdain. "Mr. Vance," she said, "you preyed on the voiceless. You preyed on the innocent animals in your care, and you preyed on the elderly man who gave you shelter. Society has no place for such callous greed." She sentenced him to 5 years in state prison. 5 years. Hunter let out a sob as the bailiffs took his arms. He looked back at Jasmine, screaming her name. Jasmine didn't look up. She kept her eyes on her boots until the door closed and the clinking of his chains faded away. I walked out of the courtroom into the bright spring sunshine. The air felt different. It felt lighter. I saw Jasmine standing on the sidewalk smoking a cigarette. She looked older than her 32 years. The divorce had left her with nothing, because Hunter had nothing. The debts he had racked up were in both their names. She had declared bankruptcy 2 weeks ago. She saw me coming. She dropped the cigarette and crushed it with her heel. "Dad," she said. I stopped. I didn't walk away, but I didn't step closer. "Hello, Jasmine," I said. "I heard you sold the house," she said. Her voice was flat, devoid of the entitlement she used to have. "I did," I said. "I put it on the market last week. It sold in 3 days. A nice young couple. They have a baby on the way. It needs new energy. It needs laughter." "Where will you go?" she asked. "Texas," I said. "I am finally taking that trip. I bought a small condo near the Gulf, near my brother's. I am going to spend my days fishing and sitting in the sun." "That sounds nice," she whispered. She looked at her hands. They were chapped and red. "I got a job," she said, "at a diner on 4th Street. I am waiting tables. The tips are okay. My feet hurt, though." I looked at her shoes. They were cheap, sensible sneakers, not the designer heels she used to wear. "Good," I said. "Hurt feet build character. It is honest money, Jasmine. It spends better than the money you steal." She nodded. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she wiped them away quickly. She knew better than to ask me for anything. She knew the bank of Dad was closed forever. "Take care of yourself, Dad," she said, turning to walk toward the bus stop. "You too," I said. I watched her go. It hurt. Of course it hurt. She was my child. But sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let someone fall so they can learn how to stand up. I walked to my car. I had one last stop to make before I left Chicago for good. I drove to the county animal shelter, the one where the animal control team had taken the dogs from my basement. The facility was loud, filled with barking, but it was a clean noise, a happy noise. I walked to the front desk and asked to speak to the director. A woman came out wiping her hands on a towel. She recognized me immediately. "Mr. Robinson," she said, smiling, "you are the hero who saved the Sycamore 15. "I am no hero," I said. "I was just the janitor who finally took out the trash." "How are they?" "They are doing great," she said, beaming. "The pregnant bulldog had her puppies yesterday, 7 healthy pups, and the others are gaining weight. We have adoption applications for almost all of them." "That is good to hear," I said. "That is very good." I reached into my pocket and pulled out an envelope. Inside was a check. When I sold the house, I made a significant profit. The market was hot, and despite the damage, the bones of the house were strong. I had taken a portion of that profit, the money I would have spent on the villa, the money I would have left to Jasmine in my will, and I wrote it out to the shelter. I handed it to the director. "This is for them," I said. "Use it for food. Use it for medicine. Use it to expand the kennels so no dog ever has to be in a cage too small for them." She opened the envelope. Her hand flew to her mouth. "Mr. Robinson," she gasped. This is $50,000. "It is just paper," I said, repeating the words my wife used to say. "It is just paper until you use it to make someone smile. Make them smile for me." I walked out of the shelter and got into my car. I rolled down the windows. I put my old Stetson hat on my head. I adjusted the rearview mirror. I saw the Chicago skyline behind me. I saw the ghosts of my past fading into the distance. I turned the key. The engine purred. I put the car in drive and pointed it south toward the highway, toward Texas, toward the ocean, toward the rest of my life. I was Albert Robinson. I was 68 years old, and I was free. The automatic doors of O'Hare International Airport slid open with a soft hydraulic hiss, welcoming me back into the belly of the beast. It had been exactly 93 days since I stood in this terminal and watched my son-in-law destroy my vacation and my trust. 93 days since I was told to go home and feed the dogs. The airport looked exactly the same. The air still smelled of jet fuel and overpriced coffee. The announcement system still echoed with the frantic calls for late passengers. The crowd still surged like a river of stressed humanity, dragging suitcases and shouting into cell phones. But while the airport had not changed, the man walking into it was entirely different. I was wearing a brand new navy blue suit tailored to fit my shoulders perfectly. My shoes were polished to a mirror shine, reflecting the overhead fluorescent lights. I was not dragging heavy bags for ungrateful children. I was pulling a single sleek leather carry-on case that glided silently beside me. I walked with my head high. My back was straight. I did not look like a retired factory worker who was afraid of the world. I looked like a man who owned his space. I looked like a man who had walked through the fire and came out made of steel. I stopped for a moment in the middle of the concourse. I let the crowd flow around me. I took a deep breath. For the first time in years, I did not feel the crushing weight of obligation. I did not worry if Jasmine had her snacks. I did not worry if Hunter was going to embarrass me with his loud mouth. I only had to worry about myself. It was a strange sensation, almost like vertigo, but it was intoxicating. I checked the departures board. Flight 492 to Houston, on time, the same flight number as before. But this time the destination was not just a city. It was a new beginning. I adjusted my hat and began the walk toward the check-in counters. My steps were light. The heavy burden of being the provider for parasites had been lifted, and I felt 20 years younger. I approached the area near the entrance to the security line. I slowed my pace. I knew this spot. I knew the exact square of polished terrazzo flooring where it happened. I stopped and looked down at the ground. I could almost see the ghost of the scene playing out. I could see the ghost of Hunter Vance, red-faced and sweating, screaming at me. I could see the ghost of Jasmine looking away in shame. I could see the confetti of the torn boarding pass fluttering down to land on my shoes. I remembered how small I had felt in that moment. I remembered the burning humiliation of being treated like a servant in front of strangers. I waited for the anger to return. I waited for the bitterness to rise up in my throat. But nothing came. The anger had burned itself out, leaving only a cool, clean ash. I felt a pang of sadness, yes. Sadness for the wasted years. Sadness for the daughter who chose greed over love. But I did not feel pain. The man who had been humiliated on this spot was gone. He had died the moment he decided to fight back. The man standing here now was a survivor. I looked up from the floor. I looked at the faces of the people passing by. No one was looking at me with pity today. They saw a dignified older man on his way to somewhere important. I smiled a small, private smile. I stepped over the invisible ghost of my past and kept walking. I did not look back. I walked up to the first-class counter. The line was empty. I stepped up to the podium and placed my passport on the marble surface. The agent looked up. It was Sarah, the same young woman who had helped me cancel the tickets 3 months ago. She looked tired, but when she saw me, her eyes widened in recognition. "Mr. Robinson," she said, a genuine smile spreading across her face. "It is so good to see you again." "It is good to see you too, Sarah," I said. She took my passport. She hesitated for a moment, lowering her voice. "I heard about what happened," she said softly. "It was in the papers. The puppy mill. The trial. I just want to say I am sorry you had to go through that. But I am glad you stood up for yourself." "Thank you, Sarah," I said. "Sometimes you have to tear the house down to fix the foundation." She typed on her keyboard. The printer whirred. She pulled out a boarding pass, a crisp, pristine piece of cardstock. She handed it to me with both hands. "Here is your ticket, Mr. Robinson. Seat 1A, window. You are the first to board." I took the ticket. I held it in my hands. I ran my thumb over the barcode. It was whole. It was mine. "Thank you," I said. I walked through security without a hitch. No red lights, no sirens. Just a nod from the officer and a, "Have a nice flight, sir." I walked to the gate. I didn't sit in the crowded waiting area. I stood by the window watching the giant metal bird that would take me away. I watched the fuel trucks and the baggage handlers. I appreciated the choreography of it all. Everything had a place. Everything had a purpose, just like my life now. They called for first-class boarding. I walked down the jet bridge. The cool air of the tunnel hit my face. I stepped onto the plane. The flight attendant greeted me by name and took my jacket. I settled into the wide leather seat. It smelled of luxury and silence. I accepted a glass of champagne. The bubbles danced in the crystal flute. As the plane pushed back from the gate, I felt the rumble of the engines vibrating through the floor. It was a powerful sound, a sound of potential energy about to be unleashed. We taxied to the runway. The pilot pushed the throttles forward. The force pressed me back into my seat. We gathered speed faster and faster, until the ground simply fell away. I looked out the window. The city of Chicago spread out below me like a vast, intricate circuit board. I saw the grid of streets. I saw the gray ribbon of the highway. I tried to find the neighborhood where I had lived for 30 years. I tried to pinpoint the street where the house on Sycamore stood. But from this height, it was all just a blur. It was insignificant. The house that had been my prison was just a speck of dust in a massive world. I took a sip of champagne. I thought about Jasmine one last time. I pictured her waiting tables at the diner, her feet aching, her hands smelling of grease. I hoped she would learn. I hoped that one day she would understand that dignity is not something you buy. It is something you build. I had lost a daughter. That is true. And that is a tragedy that no father should have to endure. But as I watched the city disappear beneath the white blanket of clouds, I realized what I had found. I had found Albert. For decades, I had been Jasmine's father, or Sarah's husband, or the foreman at the plant. I had defined myself by who I served. But now, sitting here at 30,000 feet, I was just me. And I liked the man I had become. I liked the man who saved the dogs. I liked the man who refused to be a victim. I looked at my reflection in the window. The gray hair, the lines around the eyes, they were not scars, they were medals of honor. If there is anyone listening to my story right now, anyone who feels trapped by family, anyone who feels like they are being used, I want you to look at me. They will tell you that blood is thicker than water. They will tell you that you owe them your life because they are family. But they are wrong. Love is not a debt. It is a gift. And if the people in your life do not cherish that gift, if they trample on it and demand more, then you have every right to take it back. Do not let them tear up your ticket. Do not let them tell you to stay home and watch the dogs. You are the captain of your own life. You are the pilot, and there is a whole world waiting for you above the clouds. The plane leveled off, cruising smoothly in the eternal sunshine of the upper atmosphere. I closed my eyes and smiled. I was going to Texas. I was going to see my brothers. We were going to fish. We were going to laugh. And for the first time in a long time, I was going to live. This is Albert Robinson, signing off. Thank you for listening. And remember, never let anyone clip your wings. You were born to fly. My journey taught me a painful but necessary truth. Being a parent does not mean setting yourself on fire to keep your children warm, especially when they are the ones holding the match. For years, I confused enabling with loving. I thought that by giving Jasmine everything I was protecting her, but I was only crippling her ability to stand on her own. I learned that dignity has no price tag, and that respect must be commanded, not bought. It is never too late to rewrite your ending. You can walk away from toxic family and still find peace. In fact, sometimes walking away is the only way to find it. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think I was too harsh on my daughter? Or did she get exactly what she deserved? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories about justice and redemption. Until next time, take care of yourselves.